By the time Tasha Monroe handed her dying phone to the homeless man at the bus stop, it had only 3% battery left, and that 3% was supposed to keep her connected to her daughter, her landlord, and the last job she could not afford to lose. She did not know his name. She did not know why his hands were trembling. She did not know that the number he was about to dial had been blocked by lawyers, buried under forged papers, and searched for by men in offices high above Manhattan. All she saw was an old man in a torn brown coat standing under the weak morning light on Fulton Street, asking for one call like it was the last door left in the world. It was 6:14 a.m. in Brooklyn, cold enough for breath to show, early enough that the city had not decided whether it wanted to be kind yet. The bus shelter smelled like wet concrete, old coffee, and the exhaust from delivery trucks crawling toward Atlantic Avenue. Tasha stood with her shoulder pressed against the scratched glass panel, one hand wrapped around a paper cup of gas station coffee, the other holding her cracked iPhone so tightly her thumb covered the sticker her daughter Maya had placed on the back, a crooked yellow sun with a smiling face. On the screen above the red battery warning was a message from her landlord. Final notice. Rent by Friday or possession will be filed. Beneath that was a missed call from the deli where she worked mornings, and beneath that, a reminder from Maya's school about inhaler paperwork Tasha still had not turned in because the clinic charged $25 for the form. She had been awake since 3:40, finishing a laundry shift in Queens where steam stuck to her skin and bleach lived under her fingernails no matter how hard she scrubbed. Her feet hurt inside shoes that had stopped protecting her from rain sometime last winter. In her coat pocket was a Metro card with one ride left, an eviction notice folded twice, and 63 cents in change. That was all. Then the man stepped close, not too close, careful the way people become when the world has taught them their presence makes others uncomfortable. Everyone else looked away. A woman in a navy coat pulled her purse higher on her shoulder. A young man with earbuds muttered, "Come on, bro," without lifting his eyes. The man looked at Tasha and said, "Ma'am, please. May I use your phone? Just one call." Tasha looked at the battery. 3%. She looked down the street for the bus. Nothing. She thought of Maya asleep on Mrs. Alvarez's couch, waiting for breakfast, waiting for school, waiting for a mother who was always trying to arrive before the next thing fell apart. Then she looked back at the man. His lips were cracked. His beard was gray and uneven. Around one wrist, half hidden under his sleeve, was an old blue hospital bracelet. He was not asking for money. He was asking to be heard. Tasha unlocked the phone and placed it in his shaking hand. "One call," she said softly. The man nodded like she had handed him something sacred. He dialed from memory, every number slow, exact, almost painful. When someone answered, his voice changed. It became quiet, steady, and full of a fear too old to be fake. "This is Caleb Whitaker," he said. "The transfer was forged. The blood filter belongs to the clinic trial. Tell Julian Cross I never signed it." Tasha felt the cold move under her coat. The man turned his back to the wind and listened. Then he whispered, "They have until 5 o'clock. If I disappear again, tell him the call came from Brooklyn." The phone blinked once. The screen went black. Dead. The man stared at it for half a second, then handed it back with both hands. "You just saved more than you know," he said. Before Tasha could ask what he meant, the bus pulled in with a sigh of brakes, blocking him from view. And when it rolled away, Caleb Whitaker was gone. Tasha did not understand what had just happened, and that was the part that scared her most. She had spent too many years poor to be frightened by strange mornings. Poor people learn to move through strange mornings the way other people move through traffic, with one eye open, one hand ready, and no time to fall apart. But this was different. Her phone was dead in her palm, cold and useless, and the last words spoken through it kept moving around in her head like loose coins in a dryer. The transfer was forged. The blood filter belongs to the clinic trial. Tell Julian Cross I never signed it. She climbed onto the bus because her body knew the routine even when her mind had fallen behind. The driver gave her the tired look of a man who had seen 1,000 people get on without enough sleep, enough money, or enough reason to smile. Tasha tapped her Metro card and watched the little screen flash approved. One ride left became no rides left. She moved down the aisle, holding the dead phone like a small mistake she could not afford, and found a seat near the back where the heater rattled under the window. Brooklyn slid past in gray pieces. Metal gates lifting over bodegas, a man rolling trash cans to the curb, school crossing signs blinking before the children arrived, steam rising from a manhole like the city itself was tired. Tasha pressed the power button again. Nothing. She pressed it harder, as if pressure could create electricity. Still nothing. On any other morning, a dead phone would have been annoying. This morning it was dangerous. Mrs. Alvarez might be calling from downstairs because Maya had woken up coughing. The deli might be calling to change her shift again. The landlord might be calling to say Friday was no longer Friday. When your life was held together by messages, missed calls were not small things. Missed calls became missed work. Missed work became late rent. Late rent became a marshal at your door with papers in his hand. She looked down at the cracked screen and saw her own reflection broken into thin lines. For a second she was angry at herself. Not because she had helped him. That was not it. She was angry because helping him had cost something, and she had nothing left that did not cost something. Then she remembered his hands around the phone. He had not grabbed it. He had held it carefully, like he knew exactly what it meant to hand over the only thing keeping a mother reachable. That memory softened the anger and made room for something worse. The feeling that the man had been telling the truth. Caleb Whitaker. The name had weight. Not famous weight, not celebrity weight, but the kind of weight a person carries when they have been called by doctors, lawyers, and enemies. He had not sounded confused. He had not sounded like a man making up words to seem important. He had sounded like a man repeating a message he had practiced in case he only got one chance to say it. At Franklin Avenue, 3 teenagers got on laughing too loudly for the hour. At Nostrand, a nurse in purple scrubs sat across from Tasha and closed her eyes before the bus even pulled away. Tasha watched everyone and told herself to let it go. A stranger used her phone. The phone died. He disappeared. That was the whole story. It had to be the whole story, because she did not have space in her life for mysteries that wore torn coats and spoke in million-dollar words. But then she saw the blue hospital bracelet again in her mind. Old plastic, faded print, tucked under the sleeve of his coat. Most people cut those off as soon as they got home. Caleb had kept his. Or he had not had a home to go back to. The bus hit a pothole near Bedford and Tasha's coffee jumped in the paper cup, burning the side of her thumb. She barely felt it. She was trying to remember the number he dialed, but she had only seen pieces of it. His finger moving over the screen, slow and certain. Area code maybe 212. Or 646. Manhattan numbers. Business numbers. Numbers that lived behind front desks and assistants who asked who was calling before deciding whether your voice deserved to travel any farther. When the bus stopped near the deli, Tasha stepped down into the cold and walked 2 blocks fast. Her coat pulled tight, her dead phone in her pocket like a stone. The deli lights were already on. Inside, the owner, Mr. Feld, was stacking trays of bagels behind the counter. His face tight in that way that meant he had decided to be irritated before she opened her mouth. Tasha, I called you 3 times, he said. 3 times. I needed you here 20 minutes ago. She pulled the phone out and held it up. It died on the bus. I am sorry. I came straight here. He looked at the phone, then at her shoes, then at the clock. I gave the first half of your shift to Denise. Cannot run a business on sorry. Tasha stood there with the smell of coffee, bacon, and fresh bread wrapping around her empty stomach. For hours gone. For hours she had already spent in her mind on Maya's inhaler form, and a small pack of chicken thighs from Key Food. She wanted to explain the old man, the call, the words that did not belong at a bus stop, but she heard how it would sound before she said it. So she swallowed it. Can I at least take the lunch rush? She asked. Mr. Feld sighed, not cruel exactly, but comfortable in the way people are when your emergency is not their emergency. Come back at 11:30. Outside, Tasha stood beside the newspaper box and finally felt the morning catch up with her. She had 3 hours to kill, no working phone, no MetroCard balance, and no way to check on Maya except walking home. She started walking. By the time she reached her building in Crown Heights, her socks were damp from a thin line of slush near the curb. The front door stuck the way it always did. The hallway smelled like old paint and somebody's fried onions. On the 3rd floor landing, Mrs. Alvarez opened her door before Tasha knocked, Maya's backpack in one hand, concern already on her face. Baby, your phone is off, she said. Tasha forced a smile for Maya, who was sitting on the little hallway bench tying her sneakers with the serious concentration of an 8-year-old who knew mornings were not allowed to get harder. It died, sweetheart. I am here. Maya looked up. Did you get my medicine paper? Tasha's smile held for 1 second too long. I am working on it. Then she saw it. A white envelope taped to her apartment door with blue painter's tape. Not slipped under. Not mailed. Place where neighbors could see it. Final notice of lease violation and pending possession filing. Her name printed in black. Her balance printed beneath it. The number was not huge to people who had savings accounts and emergency cards. To Tasha, it might as well have been carved into stone. Mrs. Alvarez went quiet. Maya stopped tying her shoe. Tasha pulled the notice down slowly and folded it before her daughter could read too much. That was when her dead phone, still in her coat pocket, gave one sudden vibration. Not a ring. Not a full restart. Just one brief shiver, as if some last piece of electricity had woken inside it. Tasha froze. She pulled it out. The screen flickered for half a second, just long enough to show one new voicemail notification from an unknown number. Then it went black again. And Tasha understood, with a coldness that moved from her chest to her hands, that the call at the bus stop was not over. Tasha did not let Maya see the notice for more than 2 seconds. She folded it once, then again, pressing the crease hard with her thumb the way her mother used to press church programs into neat squares after Sunday service, as if a piece of paper could be made less dangerous by becoming smaller. Maya watched her anyway. That was the thing about children raised near the edge of money. They learned to read what adults tried to hide. They learned the difference between a bill and a birthday card by the way their mother breathed before opening it. They learned that a smile could mean everything is fine, or it could mean please do not ask me in front of the neighbor. Tasha slipped the folded notice into her coat pocket, right beside the dead phone, and kissed the top of Maya's head. Her daughter's hair smelled like coconut oil, and the lavender dead angler Tasha stretched with water when the bottle got low. Come on, sunshine, she said. You are going to be late. Maya stood up from the hallway bench, backpack hanging from both shoulders, one lace still looser than the other. Are we moving again? She asked. Tasha felt Mrs. Alvarez look away, giving them the small mercy of pretending not to hear. No, baby. We are not moving. That paper is just grown-up noise. Maya looked at her for a long second, then nodded because she wanted to believe her mother more than she wanted the truth. That trust hurt worse than doubt would have. Tasha walked her down 3 flights of stairs where the paint peeled in strips along the railing, and the third step from the bottom dipped in the middle. The building had been built before anyone in it was born, and it held winter the way old coats held smoke. In the lobby the mailboxes were scratched silver, some doors hanging crooked, names written on masking tape because the landlord never replaced the labels. Tasha's box was empty except for a circular from a grocery store she could not afford to shop at unless chicken went on sale. Outside, Brooklyn had brightened into the kind of cold morning that made every window look blue. Maya tucked her hand into Tasha's, and they started toward PS 243, on St. John's Place, 6 blocks if they cut past the laundromat and the church with the red doors. Tasha could have walked it in 9 minutes alone. With Maya it took 14, because Maya avoided cracks in the sidewalk when she was nervous and asked questions she already knew the answers to when she needed comfort. Are you coming to family reading day next week? She asked. Tasha kept her eyes on the crossing light. I am going to try. Trying means maybe. Trying means I am going to do everything I can. Maya nodded again. She had learned the language of almost. Almost meant the rent might get paid. Almost meant the clinic might call back. Almost meant there might be enough on Friday for fresh strawberries if the deli let Tasha keep the lunch rush, and the laundry did not cut her Thursday hours. When they reached the schoolyard, children ran in small loud clusters, their backpacks bouncing, their cheeks shining from the cold. A father in a wool coat handed his son a paper bag from a bakery. A mother in yoga pants adjusted her daughter's pink earmuffs. Tasha looked down at Maya's jacket, purple, clean, zipper repaired with a silver paper clip because the original pull had snapped off 2 months earlier. She had washed it in the bathtub last night and hung it over the radiator, praying the heat would stay on long enough to dry it by morning. You have your inhaler? Tasha asked. Maya patted the front pocket of her backpack. Yes, ma'am. You use it if your chest gets tight. Not after. Before it gets bad. I know. And you tell Ms. Bennett. I know, Mama. Tasha softened. I am sorry. I just like your lungs. I am attached to them. Maya smiled, small but real, and for a moment the day gave them one clean thing. Then the school aide opened the gate wider and the children began moving inside. Maya hugged her mother around the waist. Tasha held on one beat longer than necessary. Learn something good, she whispered. Make somebody laugh if they look sad. Maya pulled back. You always say that. Because it is always needed. Maya disappeared through the gate, and Tasha stood there until she could no longer see the yellow sun patch she had sewn onto the side of her daughter's backpack to cover a tear. Only then did she turn away. The walk home felt longer without Maya's hand in hers. Tasha passed the pharmacy and stopped outside, looking through the glass at the aisle where the inhalers and spacer masks were kept behind the counter. Maya's rescue inhaler had 4, maybe 5 good uses left. The school form cost $25 because the clinic called it administrative paperwork, as if printing a doctor's signature took more mercy than ink. Tasha had $17 in cash hidden in a coffee can above the stove, 63 cents in her coat pocket, and 4 hours of wages missing from a morning that had already been counted before it arrived. She kept walking. Crown Heights was awake now. Delivery men rolled hand trucks over cracked pavement. A woman argued gently with a toddler who did not want mittens. A bus hissed at the curb, full of people going somewhere that paid them just enough to come back again tomorrow. Tasha moved through it with the practiced speed of a woman who knew exactly how long life allowed her to stand still. Her apartment was on the 3rd floor, Unit 3B, 1 bedroom if a person was generous and 1 room with a door if a person was honest. The living room held a brown sofa with 1 sunken cushion, a folding table that served as dining table, homework desk, bill station, and sometimes ironing board, and a television Tasha had bought used from a man on Marcus Garvey Boulevard who promised it only flickered when it was cold. He had lied. The kitchen was narrow enough that if she opened the oven and refrigerator at the same time, they touched like 2 tired people leaning into each other. On the refrigerator door, Maya's spelling tests were held up by magnets shaped like fruit. 92%. 100%. 88% with a note from Ms. Bennett that said, Maya is bright and thoughtful. Tasha read that note on nights when she needed proof that the struggle had not swallowed everything. She plugged her phone into the charger with the frayed white cord wrapped in electrical tape. Nothing happened at first. She adjusted the angle, lifted the end slightly, then wedged a spoon under it to hold the cable in place. The screen flashed the empty battery symbol, then went dark again. Come on, she whispered. Come on, baby, I need you. While it charged, she took off her coat and hung it on the back of a chair because the closet door had broken off its track last summer. She washed her hands in cold water, because the hot took 4 minutes to arrive and the gas bill was already behind. Her fingers were raw around the nails from laundry chemicals. She rubbed them with a little petroleum jelly from a jar she kept beside the sink, then opened the refrigerator. 3 eggs. Half a carton of milk that smelled acceptable if she did not think too much about the date. A plastic container of rice from 2 nights ago. 1 apple with a bruise on the side. 2 slices of American cheese. A bottle of store-brand ketchup. On the top shelf, a small brown paper bag held half of Maya's antibiotic from last month. Unfinished because the doctor changed the prescription and Tasha could not bring herself to throw away anything that had cost $34. She closed the refrigerator and leaned her forehead against the door. For 5 seconds she let her face be tired. Only 5. Then she straightened. There were rules to surviving without falling apart, and Tasha knew them all. Do not sit on the bed in work clothes because if you sit too long you will sleep through the next shift. Do not open all the bills at once because panic wastes time. Do not cry before school pickup, because swollen eyes make children ask questions. Do not count money standing up. Sit down, breathe, and count it twice. She took the coffee can from above the stove, shook out the folded bills, and laid them on the table. 10. 5. 2 singles.
$17.
Then the coins from her coat. 2 quarters. 1 dime. 3 pennies. $17.63. She wrote it on the back of an envelope because writing numbers made them feel less like weather and more like something a human might negotiate with. Rent balance. $980. Clinic form. $25. Inhaler refill with insurance discount that barely deserved the word insurance. $42. Electric minimum to avoid shutoff notice. $60. Groceries until Friday, whatever was left, which was currently a number too rude to say out loud. Tasha stared at the paper, then turned it over and wrote Thursday laundry shift, Saturday catering call, ask Feld for extra closing hours, call church pantry, ask Ms. Bennett about free clinic form. She did not write ask for help from family because there was no family nearby. Her mother had died in Georgia 6 years ago, and her older brother, Marcus, sent love and text messages and apologies when rent came up. Maya's father existed mostly as an old photograph in a shoebox and a court order that looked official but produced nothing. Tasha had stopped hating him because hatred required energy, and energy was expensive. At 9:12, the phone finally came back to life. The screen glowed dimly, cracked lines cutting across the wallpaper photo of Maya at Coney Island 2 summers ago, grinning with blue cotton candy on her lips. Notifications arrived all at once, each one a tiny demand. 3 missed calls from Mr. Feld, 1 from Mrs. Alvarez, 2 school emails, 1 automated bill reminder, and there, beneath all of them, the voicemail from an unknown number. Tasha did not touch it right away. She stood in the kitchen with the phone in her hand and listened to the radiator knock behind the wall. The sensible thing was to delete it. The sensible thing was to go back to the deli at 11:30, apologize again, take whatever hours she could get, and let Caleb Whitaker become one more strange thing the city had shown her and taken away. But the phrase he had spoken before the screen went black had followed her home. Do not let them find you first. Poor women did not survive by ignoring warnings. They survived by knowing which ones belonged to them. She pressed play. Static came first, then wind, then the sound of Caleb breathing as if he had been walking fast. His voice came through low and uneven, but clear enough to raise the hair on Tasha's arms. Tasha, I heard your name when the driver spoke to you. I am sorry. I should not have pulled you into this, but I had no one else. If this reaches you, they will say I am confused. They will say I am nobody. Look for the blue bracelet. Queen's Mercy Clinic. Locker 12. The proof is not money. It is people. Tell Cross the first patient was Eleanor. The message cut off. Tasha stood perfectly still. The apartment seemed to shrink around her. The refrigerator hummed. A siren passed somewhere far away. On the table, $17.63 sat beside a rent notice and a grocery store envelope. Her life was already too full of emergencies, too full of doors closing and numbers that would not bend. She had no room for a missing man, a forged transfer, a blood filter, a billionaire named Julian Cross, or a clinic locker in Queens. She played the voicemail again. Then a third time. On the fourth, she wrote down every word on the back of the same envelope where she had written her bills. The proof is not money. It is people. That sentence made no sense. Or maybe it made too much sense in a way she was not ready for. At 10:48, she put on her coat again and tucked the envelope into her pocket. She told herself she was going back to the deli. She told herself she was not going to Queens. She told herself lots of things people say when they are standing at the edge of a decision their old life will not survive. Then her phone buzzed in her hand. Unknown caller. Not the voicemail number. A new one. She answered but said nothing. For 2 seconds there was only silence. Then a man's voice, polished, calm, and cold enough to belong behind glass, said, Ms. Monroe, my name is Adrian Bell. I work for Julian Cross. We need to speak with you about the call made from your phone this morning. Tasha looked at the folded eviction notice on the table, then at Maya's spelling test on the refrigerator, then at the deadbolt on her apartment door. How did you get my number? She asked. The man paused. Not long. Just long enough to tell her the truth would not be comforting. That is exactly why we need to talk before anyone else does. Julian Cross was standing 41 floors above Manhattan when the call reached his office, and from that height the city looked almost peaceful. Cars became thin silver lines moving between buildings. People became dots crossing streets with no names, no rent balances, no unpaid clinic forms, no daughters waiting outside school gates. From up there, suffering became distance, and distance had been the one luxury Julian had spent 20 years learning how to buy. His office at Cross Meridian Health Tech took up the top floor of a glass tower near Bryant Park. All pale wood, quiet carpets, filtered air, and windows so clean they made the skyline look edited. On the conference table in front of him sat a black leather folder containing the final acquisition documents for the Whitaker Portable Hemofiltration System, a device his analysts believed could dominate the emergency renal care market within 5 years. The number printed on the first page was $3.8 million, the final escrow release attached to a transfer of rights that looked perfect to everyone in the room. Perfect signature. Perfect notarization. Perfect chain of ownership. Perfect legal language. Perfect enough to make most people stop asking moral questions. Julian wore a charcoal suit with no tie, a white shirt open at the collar, and a watch so understated only people with very expensive taste would recognize it. He did not look like a man about to lose his composure. He looked like what every business magazine had trained him to look like. Disciplined, visionary, controlled. At 46, Julian Cross was one of the most respected black founders in American medical technology. His company built hospital software, remote monitoring platforms, and portable treatment devices used in 34 states. He had been profiled beside words like innovation, access, equity, and disruption. He had given speeches about making medicine more humane. He had donated millions to community clinics and stood on stages beside mayors who smiled as if gratitude were part of the contract. But the truth was quieter and less flattering. Julian had not practiced medicine in 14 years. He had not touched a patient in 14 years. He had learned to heal through systems, then through companies, then through acquisitions, then through language so polished it no longer sounded like pain. The people his products were supposed to serve arrived on his desk as user groups, patient outcomes, market segments, reimbursement models, underserved populations. He could talk about them for 40 minutes without once picturing a mother counting inhaler doses at a kitchen table. Around the conference table sat 8 people waiting for him to sign. Adrian Bell, his chief of staff, stood near the wall with a tablet in one hand and a phone in the other. Victor Langley, outside counsel for the Seller Group, sat 2 seats down from Julian, his silver pen aligned perfectly with the edge of his folder. Victor had the pleasant expression of a man who had made a career out of hiding pressure inside courtesy. Across from him were 2 investment partners, a regulatory consultant, a licensing officer, and Julian's own general counsel, Priya Desai, who had already reviewed the documents 3 times and found nothing wrong that the law was willing to admit. "Once you sign," Victor said, "the escrow release processes by 5 o'clock. Rights clear by close of business. Manufacturing partners can be notified tomorrow morning." Julian did not answer immediately. He was looking at the name on the transfer history. Caleb Whitaker. 12 letters typed in clean black ink, reduced to a prior inventor designation. Caleb Whitaker had once been impossible to reduce. He had been stubborn, brilliant, messy, suspicious of rich donors, allergic to committees, and unable to walk past a broken machine without taking it apart to prove it had been assembled by someone who did not understand consequences. Julian had met him 22 years earlier in a basement lab behind a free clinic in Baltimore, back when Julian was still Dr. Cross, still wearing cheap dress shoes and a white coat that made his mother cry the first time she saw him in it. Eleanor Cross had been the first person in their family to believe education could be a form of escape without becoming a betrayal. She had cleaned hotel rooms for 11 years, then worked the front desk at a dental office, then spent the last stretch of her life pretending the swelling in her legs was nothing because the copay was never nothing. Kidney failure did not arrive in their family like an emergency. It arrived like a bill, then another bill, then a schedule, then a chair in a dialysis center under fluorescent lights where time moved in 4-hour blocks. Julian had been a resident then, exhausted and proud, running on coffee and the old fear that one mistake would send him back to being the boy with second-hand sneakers in a school full of children whose parents used summer as a verb. Caleb was volunteering at Queen's Mercy before it expanded, moving between Baltimore and New York with boxes of parts, writing formulas on napkins, arguing with suppliers, building a portable blood filtration prototype from discarded equipment and impossible conviction. Hospitals are not the only place people should be allowed to survive, Caleb had told him once. Julian remembered that sentence because Eleanor had been sitting 5 feet away under a faded blanket, pretending not to listen. The prototype had not cured her. Nothing did. But it gave her 6 more months at home instead of in a center 3 bus rides away. 6 months of Sunday cornbread, 6 months of correcting Julian's posture, 6 months of asking whether he had found a nice woman as if his loneliness were a scheduling problem, 6 months of sitting by the window with her Bible open and the television too loud. Caleb gave them time. Not enough. There was never enough. But time still counted, even when it came measured in borrowed afternoons. After Eleanor died, Julian built Cross Meridian with grief sharpened into ambition. He told himself he would scale what Caleb had started. He told himself systems mattered more than sentiment. He told himself that once he had enough money, enough influence, enough leverage, he could protect inventions like Caleb's from disappearing into the jaws of companies that priced mercy by the unit. But success had a way of making promises look inefficient. Caleb became a difficult file, then a disputed file, then a missing inventor with mental competency questions attached to his name by attorneys Julian had not personally hired, but had also not personally stopped. Years passed. Julian moved higher. Caleb moved out of view. That morning the folder on the table said everything was clean. Then Adrian's phone vibrated. Julian watched him glance down. The change in Adrian's face was small, but Julian had paid him too much for small changes not to mean something. Adrian stepped closer and lowered his voice. "We traced the call from this morning." Victor's pen stopped moving. "What call?" Julian asked. Adrian looked at the room, then back at Julian. A call came into the old physician line at Queen's Mercy. It was routed through archives because your name was attached to the Whitaker trial records. The caller identified himself as Caleb Whitaker. Silence moved across the table with more force than sound would have. Priya looked up sharply. One of the investment partners shifted in his chair. Victor gave a soft laugh that contained no humor. "That is not possible," he said. "Mr. Whitaker has been unavailable for years, and the legal record is quite clear regarding his status." Julian did not look at Victor. "What did he say?" Adrian swallowed. "He said the transfer was forged. He said the blood filter belonged to the clinic trial. He said he never signed it." The phone died before the location was confirmed, but the number belonged to a woman named Tasha Monroe in Brooklyn. Julian felt the name Caleb Whitaker move through him like a locked door opening in a house he had abandoned. He looked down at the document again. The signature that had seemed ordinary a minute ago now looked too smooth, too convenient, too dead. "Play the recording," he said. Adrian hesitated. "It is incomplete." "Play it." The voice came through Adrian's phone, thin and rough beneath static, but Julian knew it before the second sentence. Age had worn it down. Fear had tightened it. But the shape of it was still there. The same voice that once cursed at a pump valve for being cheaply made. The same voice that once told Eleanor Cross she could sit near the window during treatment because sunlight was not a luxury. "This is Caleb Whitaker. The transfer was forged. The blood filter belongs to the clinic trial. Tell Julian Cross I never signed it." The recording ended. No one spoke. Julian's hand rested flat on the folder. His palm covered the signature line where his name was supposed to go. Victor leaned back slightly. "Julian, with respect, we do not know who that was. Vulnerable individuals are exploited all the time. Old names get pulled from public filings. This could be fraud. Could be confusion. It could be someone attempting to interfere with a lawful transaction before escrow closes." "He called me Julian," Julian said. Victor blinked. "Excuse me." The message said tell Julian Cross. Not Mr. Cross. Not Chief Executive Officer Cross. Julian. Priya's eyes moved from Julian to Victor. She heard it too. The difference between a public name and a remembered one. Julian stood and walked to the window. Far below, buses moved along Fifth Avenue, carrying people whose lives would never appear in a board packet, unless someone found a way to bill for them. He could see his reflection in the glass, tailored, composed, surrounded by a room full of people waiting for him to behave like the man they understood. The man they understood would pause the signature for optics, assign an internal review, manage risk, protect valuation, and never let an old debt speak louder than a clean contract. The man his mother raised had been quieter for years, but not gone. Eleanor's name had been on Caleb's first trial sheet. Eleanor had been the first patient. Julian turned back to the table. "Nobody signs anything." Victor's polite expression thinned. There are deadlines attached to this transaction. Then the deadlines can wait. They cannot, actually. That is the point of an escrow deadline. Julian looked at him fully for the first time. Then maybe the point was to make sure he could not speak before 5 o'clock. The room changed after that. Not visibly. The furniture did not move. The skyline did not darken. But every person at the table understood that the acquisition had stopped being a transaction and become a confession waiting for evidence. Julian turned to Adrian. Find Tasha Monroe. Not through police. Not through intimidation. Send someone respectful, and if she says no, we do not push. I want to know exactly what happened at that bus stop. Adrian nodded. Already in progress. And Caleb? No confirmed location yet. Julian looked at Priya. Pull every document attached to the Whitaker transfer. Original signatures, medical trial records, competency filings, licensing amendments, all of it. I want outside forensic review by noon. Victor closed his folder slowly. You are creating unnecessary exposure. Julian picked up the black leather acquisition folder and held it for a moment. $3.8 million was not a small number to most people. In this room it had been treated as a step. A release. A mechanism. But somewhere in Brooklyn, a woman with a dying phone had done what a tower full of professionals had failed to do. She had let a man speak before the paper erased him. Julian placed the folder back on the table and signed. No, he said quietly. I am finally looking at the exposure that was already there. His phone buzzed then. Adrian glanced at his tablet. Miss Monroe answered. She is scared, but she is listening. Julian's throat tightened in a way he had not expected. He thought of his mother's hand resting under a clinic blanket. He thought of Caleb saying hospitals are not the only place people should be allowed to survive. He thought of a woman in Brooklyn who had no reason to trust anyone from his world. Tell her this, Julian said. Tell her I knew Caleb Whitaker. Tell her I owe him more than money. And tell her that whatever she heard this morning, it may be the only reason a stolen thing does not become legal by sunset. Tasha did not go to Queens first. She went back to the deli because poverty did not pause for mystery, and a woman could be standing in the middle of something worth millions and still need $11 an hour before lunch. By the time she reached Mr. Feld's shop again, the morning rush had thinned into scattered customers, construction workers buying coffee, office assistants picking up orders, a grandmother choosing rugula with exact attention as if sweetness required discipline. Tasha tied on her black apron, washed her hands until the cold water made her knuckles ache, and took her place behind the counter. Her body moved automatically. Slice bagels. Wrap sandwiches. Pour coffee. Smile when people did not look at her. Apologize when the card reader took too long. Her phone sat in her apron pocket, heavy with the call from Adrian Bell, heavier with the voicemail from Caleb. She had told Adrian she was working until 2, even though she did not know whether that was true. She had told him she would not meet anyone without knowing who they were, where they wanted her to go, and why a man with Julian Cross's name had her number before she had even figured out what to do with the warning. Adrian had not raised his voice. That made him more frightening somehow. Men who shouted were familiar. Men who stayed calm while reaching into your life from 41 floors away were harder to measure. He had said, Miss Monroe, Mr. Cross is not trying to frighten you. He knew Caleb Whitaker years ago. He believes the call you received may be important. Tasha had looked at the rent notice on her table and almost laughed. Important was one of those words rich people used when they had the luxury of ranking emergencies. Her important was Maya's inhaler. Her important was the landlord's tape on her door. Her important was not losing the deli shift because she had given her last 3% of battery to a man the world had already stepped around. But she had heard something in Adrian's voice when he said Caleb's name, a carefulness, like the name had sharp edges. So she had not hung up. She had said, I am not signing anything. I am not getting in trouble for being decent. Adrian had paused. No one is asking you to sign anything. That was when she knew someone eventually would. At 12:26, while Tasha was wrapping turkey on rye for a woman who kept checking her watch, a black sport utility vehicle stopped across the street. It was not loud. It did not speed. It simply arrived with the quiet confidence of something that expected space to open for it. The windows were tinted dark enough that the street reflected off them. Tasha saw it through the glass front of the deli and felt her stomach tighten. Poor neighborhoods notice cars like that. They were either politicians, developers, police without markings, or people who believed money made them private. A man stepped out wearing a navy overcoat and shoes polished so clean they seemed inappropriate for Brooklyn's slush. He looked both ways before crossing, not because he was afraid of traffic, but because he was trained to enter spaces deliberately. He came into the deli, and the bell above the door gave its tired little ring. Mr. Feld looked up from the register. Tasha kept her hands on the sandwich paper. The man removed one glove. Ms. Monroe. Every customer in line turned slightly, the way people turn when a private problem becomes public. Tasha lifted her chin. Who is asking? Adrian Bell. We spoke earlier. He did not offer his hand over the counter. Tasha appreciated that. Some men offered hands like signatures, expecting the world to accept them. Adrian only reached into his coat and placed a business card near the napkin dispenser, far enough away that she could choose whether to touch it. Heavy cream cardstock. Black lettering. Cross Meridian Health Tech. Chief of Staff. A Manhattan address that probably had more elevators than her building had apartments. Mr. Feld's eyes moved from the card to Tasha with sudden interest. Everything all right? He asked, in the voice of a man hoping trouble had not come in during lunch. I am working, Tasha said to Adrian. Adrian nodded. I understand. Mr. Cross would like to speak with you today. Privately. We can wait until your shift ends. And if I say no? Then I will leave my card, and we will not approach you at work again. That answer was too respectful to be easy. Tasha looked at him, searching for the catch. You found me at work. Your phone number was connected to your payroll profile through a public employment verification vendor. Should not have been that easy. I am sorry. It was the apology that irritated her. Not because it sounded false, but because it sounded informed. He knew exactly how easily people like her could be found when people like him decided to look. Tasha slid the turkey sandwich into a paper bag and handed it to the woman waiting at the counter. $8.75, she said. Her voice did not shake. She rang up 2 more customers, wiped the counter, refilled the coffee lids, and made Adrian stand there among the smell of pickles, toasted bread, and fryer oil while the world he came from waited. He did not check his watch. That was smart. At 2:05, Mr. Feld told her she could leave, not generously, but because the lunch crowd was gone and curiosity had made him uncomfortable. You come tomorrow on time, he said. Tasha untied her apron. Yes, sir. This some legal thing? No, sir. He looked at Adrian's coat, then back at her. Rich people legal thing? Tasha almost smiled. I am hoping not. Outside, the cold hit her face. Adrian stood beside the black vehicle but did not open the door yet. Mr. Cross can meet you at our office, or somewhere public if you prefer. Public, Tasha said immediately. And I am texting my neighbor where I am going. Of course. And I need to pick up my daughter by 3:10. We can have you back before then. Tasha gave him a look. Do not make promises based on traffic you do not ride in. For the first time, Adrian almost smiled. Fair enough. They agreed on a coffee shop 3 blocks away. One Tasha knew because she passed it often and never went inside. The kind of place with exposed brick, $5 muffins, and people working on laptops as if rent could be paid by looking thoughtful. Adrian walked. The sport utility vehicle followed half a block behind. Tasha noticed that too. Is that necessary? She asked. Security protocol. For me or for you? For the situation. That is a rich person answer. Adrian accepted it without defense. It is. Inside the coffee shop, warm air smelled like espresso and cinnamon. Tasha ordered nothing. Adrian ordered plain coffee and asked if she wanted tea, water, food. She said no to all 3 because accepting small things from powerful people made them feel entitled to larger things later. They sat at a corner table near the window. Adrian placed his phone face down, both hands visible. Mr. Cross is on his way from Manhattan. Before he arrives, I need to ask what you remember from this morning. Tasha kept her coat on. You have the recording. We have part of the first call. We do not have what happened before or after. Before, a man asked to use my phone. After, my phone died and he disappeared. Did he say where he was going? No. Did he appear confused? Tasha's eyes sharpened. There it was. The question dressed politely. He appeared cold, tired, scared. That is not the same as confused. Adrian took that in. You are right. It is not. He knew the number by heart. He knew what he wanted to say. He did not ask me for money. He did not try to keep my phone. He gave it back even after it died. Did he mention anyone following him? Tasha thought of the voicemail. She had not decided whether to share it. Caleb had left it for her, not for a company. He said not to let them find me first. Adrian became still. It was subtle, but Tasha saw it. People with less money learned to read rooms because rooms could turn on them. Them who? He asked. That is what I would like to know. A black sedan pulled up outside, not as large as the sport utility vehicle but lower, sleeker, the kind of car that did not look bought so much as selected. Adrian stood. Tasha turned toward the window. Julian Cross stepped out alone.
No entourage.
No visible security. He wore the same charcoal suit from the conference room, though Tasha did not know that, and a dark overcoat that fit him like someone had measured not just his shoulders but his life. He paused before entering the coffee shop and looked through the glass. Their eyes met for 1 second. Tasha expected what she had seen before from wealthy men entering poor people's stories. Assessment, pity, and patience, the quick scan that sorted a person into category. Julian did look at her carefully but not down. That unsettled her more than arrogance would have. He came inside, and the coffee shop seemed to notice him without knowing why. Conversations lowered half an inch. A barista straightened behind the counter. Adrian stepped aside. Julian did not sit immediately. Ms. Monroe, he said. I am Julian Cross. His voice was lower than she expected, quiet enough that he had to mean it. Tasha did not stand. I know who you are now. Thank you for agreeing to meet. I did not agree to meet. I agreed to listen until 3 o'clock. Julian nodded once. Then I will not waste your time. That was the first thing he said that made sense to her. He sat across from her, leaving the chair between them empty at an angle, not crowding, not performing closeness. For a moment, the table held two worlds so different they almost made the air bend. On Julian's side, a phone without cracks, a watch worth more than Tasha's yearly rent, a coat that had never waited outside a laundromat in January. On Tasha's side, damp shoes, a deli uniform under a thrift store sweater, a phone held together by a sticker from a child who still believed sons could smile. Julian looked at the phone. Not with disgust. With recognition of evidence. Caleb used that phone, he said. For less than a minute. Less than a minute can matter. Tasha studied him. Did you know him? Julian's jaw tightened. Yes. Then why was he sleeping near a bus stop asking strangers for help? The question landed harder than anything Adrian had asked. Julian did not answer quickly, and Tasha respected him slightly for not lying fast. That is what I am trying to understand. No, Tasha said. That is what you are trying to fix before 5 o'clock. Adrian looked at her. Julian did too. Tasha leaned back. He said they had until 5. You people keep saying transaction, escrow, transfer. I do not know what all of that means, but I know a deadline when I hear one. Deadlines are how people with power make sure people without it run out of breath before they can explain. Julian looked down at the table, and for the first time since entering, the polish around him cracked. Not dramatically, just enough. You are not wrong. Tasha almost wished he had argued. Agreement required her to decide whether he meant it. Julian reached into his coat and removed a folded photograph, worn at the edges despite the expensive world it came from. He placed it on the table and turned it toward her. The photo showed a younger Julian in a white coat standing beside an older black woman under a clinic blanket. Next to them stood Caleb Whitaker, thinner, cleaner, hair darker, one hand resting on a machine with tubes and a metal case. He was smiling with the particular pride of someone who had made something work when everyone said it would not. Tasha stared at the picture. That is him. Julian closed his eyes for half a second. When he opened them, there was relief there and something like shame. You are certain? Yes. Older. Rougher. But that is him. The woman is my mother, Julian said. Her name was Eleanor. Caleb's device gave her 6 months she would not have had otherwise. Tasha looked from the photo to Julian's face. A rich man with a dead mother. A homeless man with a stolen voice. A medical device worth more than her entire block. The story was getting bigger but not clearer. He left me a voicemail, she said. Adrian inhaled quietly. Julian did not move. What did it say? Tasha's fingers tightened around her phone. Before I play anything, I need you to understand something. I am not part of your company. I am not part of whatever paper somebody forged. I am not a witness you can manage. I have a daughter. I have rent due. I have a boss who already cut my hours today because my phone died helping your friend. Julian's eyes lowered, not away from her, but toward the cracked phone between them. What did it cost you? 4 hours. Maybe more. I can reimburse you. Tasha's face hardened. That is not why I said it. Julian went quiet. Adrian looked at his coffee. Around them, people typed on laptops and paid $7 for drinks with Fomart, while Tasha sat there deciding whether to trust a billionaire with the voice of a man who had nothing but a hospital bracelet. Finally, she pressed play. Caleb's voicemail filled the small space between them. Tasha, I heard your name when the driver spoke to you. I am sorry. I should not have pulled you into this, but I had no one else. If this reaches you, they will say I am confused. They will say I am nobody. Look for the blue bracelet. Queen's Mercy Clinic. Locker 12. The proof is not money. It is people. Tell Cross the first patient was Eleanor. The message ended. Julian did not speak. His hand had curled slowly around the edge of the table. Adrian's face had gone pale in a way his complexion could not hide. Tasha watched both men and knew then that the name Eleanor had not been a detail. It had been a key. Julian touched the photograph with 2 fingers barely. Nobody outside the original trial knew my mother was the first patient, he said. That record was sealed. Tasha felt the coffee shop tilt around her. So he was telling the truth. Yes, Julian said. And if he mentioned Locker 12, then he left proof somewhere he believed rich people would not look. Tasha stood so quickly the chair scraped behind her. I have to pick up my daughter. Julian rose too but did not block her. Ms. Monroe, Caleb may be in danger of being silenced legally, not physically. If those documents are taken or destroyed, by 5 o'clock the transfer becomes nearly impossible to unwind. Then go to Queens. We will. No, Tasha said, putting on her coat. You will go to the wrong Queens. You will send a car to the front door and ask the wrong person at the desk with your business card showing. A man hiding from rich people will not go where rich people look. Julian absorbed that. Then where would he go? Tasha picked up the cracked phone, the photograph, and the folded envelope with her notes. She looked out at the black car waiting by the curb, then back at the billionaire who suddenly seemed less powerful than he had when he walked in. First, I pick up my daughter, she said. Then we find the places people go when they need help but cannot afford to be found. By the time Tasha reached PS 243, Julian Cross's black car was parked half a block away behind a delivery truck, quiet and out of place, like a piano left on a sidewalk. She had made him wait there. Not because she wanted to embarrass him. Not because she enjoyed power, but because Maya's school was one of the few places in her life where Tasha could still control the order of things. First her child. Then the mystery. First, the ordinary duty that had held her together for 8 years. Then the impossible call that had cracked the day open. Maya came out with her class in a line, backpack bouncing, purple jacket zipped to her chin, one mitten missing because mittens in elementary school vanished like unpaid wages. The moment she saw her mother, she smiled, then slowed when she noticed Julian standing near the curb with Adrian behind him. Children notice strangers faster than adults wanted them to. Tasha bent down and fixed Maya's scarf. Hey sunshine. How was reading? Maya looked past her. Who are they? People who need help finding someone. Are they police? No. Are they from the landlord? That question landed in Tasha's chest like a closed fist, not because it was loud, but because it was too practiced. 8-year-old girls were supposed to ask whether strangers were teachers, cousins, maybe somebody from church. They were not supposed to measure adults by whether they could take your home. Tasha touched her cheek. No, baby. They are not from the landlord. Maya looked at Julian again. Julian, to his credit, did not step forward until Tasha nodded. Then he came only close enough to be polite and lowered his posture slightly, not kneeling, not performing, just making himself less tall. Hello, Maya. My name is Julian. Maya did not offer her hand. She looked at his shoes instead. Black leather. Dry despite the slush. You have a driver? She asked. Adrian coughed once into his glove. Julian looked caught between honesty and discomfort. Yes. Maya nodded as if filing that away under facts about another planet. My mom takes the bus. I know, Julian said softly. That is one of the reasons I am grateful she is helping me. Tasha heard the word grateful and watched Maya hear it too. Poor children were used to adults being grateful for their mother's labor, not their judgment. Cleaning, serving, carrying, waiting, apologizing. But this man had said helping me, and for a brief second, Maya looked at her mother differently, not with surprise exactly, but with recognition of something she had always suspected, that Tasha knew things other people needed. They walked to Mrs. Alvarez's building first, because Tasha was not taking Maya across Queens with strangers and unfinished danger in the air. The black car followed slowly, never too close. On the way, Maya held Tasha's hand and whispered, Is this about the man who used your phone? Tasha stopped walking. How did you know that? You were talking to Mrs. Alvarez when my shoe was untied. You thought I was not listening. Tasha almost smiled. You are always listening. That is because grown-ups leave out the important parts. Tasha looked down at her daughter's face, so serious under the lopsided knit hat Mrs. Alvarez had made her last Christmas. He might need help, she said. And we might be the only people who know where to look. Maya accepted that in the solemn way children accept missions in stories, without asking whether the adults were qualified. At Mrs. Alvarez's door, Tasha gave instructions about homework, dinner, and the inhaler. Mrs. Alvarez listened, then glanced over Tasha's shoulder at Julian waiting on the landing below, too polished for the peeling paint and flickering hallway bulb. Mija, she said quietly. You sure? Tasha wanted to say yes. Instead she said the truth. No. But I am sure that man on the voicemail sounded like everybody had already decided not to believe him. Mrs. Alvarez's face changed. She had lived long enough in rent-stabilized buildings, clinic waiting rooms, and city offices to understand that kind of sentence. She took Maya's backpack. Then go careful. Maya hugged her mother hard. Do not let the rich man lose you, she whispered. Tasha laughed once despite herself. I will not. And charge your phone. Yes, ma'am. Downstairs, Julian opened the rear door of the car. Tasha paused. She had been inside nice cars before, but only cleaning them, not riding in them. This one smelled like leather, cedar, and air that had never been trapped in a subway tunnel. A bottle of still water waited in the cup holder. A phone charger was already plugged in. White cord coiled neatly, not frayed, not taped, not propped at an angle with a spoon. Tasha saw it and felt an irrational sting behind her eyes. It was not the car that bothered her. It was the casual abundance of small solutions. In Julian's world, batteries did not die unless someone forgot to replace them. In hers, a charger could become a family emergency. She slid into the seat, keeping her purse on her lap. Julian sat on the opposite side, leaving space. Adrian took the front passenger seat. The driver pulled away from the curb. For the first minute, nobody spoke. Brooklyn moved by outside the tinted window, but the glass changed it. Corners looked quieter. Trash bags less sharp. People less exposed. Tasha wondered how many decisions had been made from cars like this by men who saw neighborhoods only through softened edges. Julian broke the silence. Queen's Mercy Clinic moved locations twice. The current office is in Long Island City, but if Caleb said Locker 12, he may have meant the old basement annex. Tasha turned toward him. Why would he leave proof in a clinic locker? Because the early trial was run there before Cross Meridian existed. Before any formal funding. Caleb kept prototypes, handwritten logs, patient notes. He never trusted cloud storage. Smart man. Julian looked out the window. Paranoid, I used to think. Sometimes paranoid is what people call you when you are right before they are ready to admit it. Julian looked back at her, and Tasha saw the sentence land somewhere personal. Adrian turned slightly from the front. The old annex is technically closed. The building was sold 5 years ago. Part of it is now a private imaging center. Part of the basement may still be used for storage. Technically closed, Tasha repeated. That means there is a side door. Adrian hesitated. Probably. There is always a side door. Julian studied her. You know the building? No. I know buildings that serve poor people. The front desk tells you what policy says. The side door tells you what people actually do. The car crossed the bridge into Queens beneath a pale winter sky. Julian's phone kept lighting up in his hand. He did not answer. The first 3 calls. On the 4th, he looked at the name and silenced it with his thumb. Tasha noticed. Is that the lawyer? Victor Langley. The one who says Caleb is confused. Yes. And you are not answering? Not yet. Because you do not want him to know where we are going. Julian looked at her with something close to respect. Yes. Tasha leaned back. Then your office leaks. Adrian turned fully this time. What makes you say that? Because I got a call from you, then less than an hour later you came to my job. If you could find me that fast, so could anyone with access to the same trail. And Caleb warned me not to let them find me first. That means someone already knew there would be a me. The car went quiet again, not empty quiet, working quiet. Julian looked at Adrian. Change the route. No office communications. Use Priya only. Adrian nodded and took out a second phone, smaller, plain black, the kind people used when they knew the first phone was too visible. Tasha watched that too. The rich had backup phones for secrecy. She had one phone with a cracked screen and a daughter's sticker trying to hold sunlight over broken glass. They reached Long Island City at 3:58. The old Queen's Mercy building stood between a renovated pharmacy and a shuttered tax preparation office, 3 stories of tan brick with a faded stone cross above the entrance that nobody had bothered to remove. The main doors belonged now to a sleek imaging center with blue signage and frosted glass. Inside, the waiting room looked new, all gray chairs and digital check-in screens. Julian and Adrian stepped toward the entrance, but Tasha caught Julian's sleeve. Not hard. Just enough. Not there. Julian stopped. Why? Because Caleb did not say imaging center. He said clinic. Old clinic. Locker 12. People do not hide old proof where rich renovations point you. Walk around. They went down the side street where the pavement dipped near the curb and cardboard boxes leaned against a service entrance. Behind the building, a narrow alley held a dumpster, a rusted railing, and a metal door painted beige so many times the paint had thickened around the hinges. Beside the door was an old buzzer panel with half the labels missing. One strip of yellow tape still showed the letters QMC staff. Tasha pointed. Side door. Adrian tried the handle. Locked. Julian reached for his phone. Tasha shook her head. Do not call the front. They will ask who you are. Then everyone knows. She looked around the alley and saw a woman in green scrubs sitting on an upside-down milk crate near the dumpster, smoking an electronic cigarette and scrolling on her phone. Tasha walked over before Julian could say anything. Excuse me, ma'am, she said. The woman looked up, guarded. Tasha knew that look. It was the face of someone on a 10-minute break who did not want to inherit a problem. We are trying to find somebody who used to come through here. Older man. Gray beard. Blue hospital bracelet. Name Caleb. The woman's expression shifted by a fraction. Not recognition she wanted to share, but recognition all the same. I do not know any Caleb. Tasha nodded, accepting the lie respectfully. That is okay. He told me to look for locker 12. Said the proof was people. The woman stopped scrolling. Her thumb froze over the screen. Julian moved slightly behind Tasha, but she lifted one hand without looking back, telling him to stay quiet. The woman studied Tasha's coat, her work shoes, the frayed cuff of her sweater, then glanced at Julian's overcoat and Adrian's polished shoes. He with them? She asked. Today, yes. But not before me. The woman looked at Tasha for a long moment. Caleb used to fix the old autoclave when it jammed. Would not take money. Just ask for coffee black 2 sugars. Last time I saw him he was thinner. Kept touching that bracelet like he was reminding himself he had been somewhere official once. Tasha's throat tightened. Do you know about Locker 12? The woman stood, crushed the electronic cigarette off, and walked to the metal door. I know the basement still floods when it rains. I know administration pretends the old lockers are empty because empty things do not need insurance. She punched a code into the side keypad, shielding the numbers with her body out of habit. The lock clicked. Before opening the door, she looked at Julian. If you are here to clean out some old man stuff, I do not know you. Julian said. I am here because I should have listened to him years ago. The woman did not soften, but she did not close the door either. That is a popular sentence after damage is done. She pulled it open. The air inside smelled like dust, bleach and damp cardboard. A narrow stairwell led down into dim yellow light. Tasha went first. Julian did not argue. The basement was colder than outside, with low ceilings, exposed pipes, and old signs pointing to rooms that no longer served their names. Pediatrics, records, staff lounge. Along one wall stood a row of metal lockers, dented and pale green, some hanging open, some sealed with rust. Numbers had been painted on them in black. 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. Locker 12 had no lock. Just a strip of blue medical tape across the handle. Tasha recognized the color immediately. Same faded blue as the bracelet under Caleb's sleeve. Adrian took out gloves. Julian whispered. Wait. He looked at Tasha. He told you to look. You should open it. Tasha did not want to. That was the truth. She had already given enough to this day. Her battery, her wages, her peace, her name to people who could find too much. But Caleb's voice had said they will say I am nobody, and she knew what it meant when the world needed only one excuse to stop hearing you. She reached for the handle and pulled. The locker opened with a scrape that seemed too loud for the basement. Inside was not money, not jewels, not anything that looked worth $3.8 million. There was a battered black binder, a small metal case wrapped in a grocery bag, a stack of Polaroid photographs held together by a rubber band, and a folded piece of paper taped to the back wall. Julian stepped closer, and the basement light caught his face. He had gone still. Tasha lifted the photographs first. The top one showed Caleb years younger, standing beside a machine with tubes and gauges. Next to him was Julian Cross, smiling under a blanket. Behind her stood other patients, mostly older, mostly black and brown, some in wheelchairs, some holding paper cups, all looking toward the camera like they had been asked to believe in something together. On the whiteboard behind them, in blue marker, were the words First Community Trial, Queen's Mercy, Patient Group A. Tasha turned to Julian. The proof is people, she said. Julian took the photo with careful fingers. For a moment, the billionaire in the tailored coat was gone, and there was only a son looking at his mother alive in a room he had allowed history to bury. Adrian opened the binder. Inside were handwritten logs, consent forms, dates, treatment notes, maintenance sketches, signatures, and next to the first entry, a name written clearly in Caleb's blocky hand. Julian Cross, Patient 1. Julian breathed out like the air had been taken from him years ago, and only now returned in the wrong room. Then Tasha unfolded the paper taped inside the locker. It was a note written in blue ink, uneven but legible. If Tasha Monroe is reading this, it means someone poor did what powerful people would not believe me before they priced the truth. Beneath that was a second line that made Adrian reach for his phone and made Julian close his eyes. Victor has the false original. The real signature was never mine. The note did not make the basement louder. It made it smaller. Tasha stood with the folded paper in her hand while the old pipes clicked above her, and the damp smell of forgotten records pressed against the walls. Julian read the line once, then again, and something in his face changed in a way no money could hide. Victor has the false original. The real signature was never mine. For several seconds nobody moved. Adrian took photographs of the note, the binder, the patient logs, the metal case, and the locker number, careful, methodical, the way people behave when they understand that truth is only useful if it can survive a courtroom. But Julian was not looking at the evidence anymore. He was looking at the Polaroid of his mother. Julian Cross sat in the center of the picture with a faded quilt across her knees, thinner than Tasha had expected from the strength in Julian's voice when he said her name. She had one hand resting on the portable filtration machine, the other lifted slightly, as if someone had made her laugh right before the camera flashed. Behind her, Caleb Whitaker stood with his sleeves rolled up, wearing safety goggles on top of his head like a man too busy fixing things to remember what was on his own body. Julian touched the edge of the photo but did not pick it up. His hand hovered above it, close enough to claim it, far enough to punish himself. "I was there that day," he said. His voice was quiet, and for the first time Tasha did not hear the chief executive officer, the billionaire, the man whose name opened glass doors. She heard a son. "I was supposed to stay for the whole trial. Caleb wanted me to help monitor vitals. My mother wanted me to bring her peach tea from the bodega on the corner. She said the clinic coffee tasted like boiled cardboard." He almost smiled, but it did not survive. "I got a call from a venture partner. First serious investor meeting I had ever been offered. I told myself I would only be gone 1 hour." Tasha did not interrupt. She knew stories like this were not really told to the person standing there. They were told to the room where the past had been waiting. Julian leaned one hand against the old locker, not for support exactly, but because the metal was real and cold and did not care what he had become. "I came from Baltimore with 2 suits and a scholarship nobody in my neighborhood understood except my mother. She understood everything. She could not pronounce half the courses I took in medical school, but she knew what it meant for a door to open. She used to iron my white coat like it was church linen. She would tell the neighbors my son is going to be the kind of doctor who listens, not the kind who just writes things down." His eyes stayed on the photo. "And I was. For a while." The basement light buzzed above them. Adrian stopped taking photographs. Even he seemed to know that documentation could wait 1 minute. Julian's memories did not arrive in order. They came the way old pain comes attached to objects. The quilt in the photograph. The blue marker on the whiteboard. The metal case in the locker. He remembered Queen's Mercy before donors renamed. Rooms and consultants added mission statements to the walls. Back then it was a narrow clinic that smelled of disinfectant, overworked coffee and damp coats in winter. People came because emergency rooms cost too much, because specialists did not take their insurance, because pain became manageable when the alternative was rent. Julian had been 24, still carrying textbooks in a backpack with one broken zipper, working under doctors who were kind but exhausted and administrators who could turn scarcity into policy with a straight face. Caleb Whitaker did not fit there and somehow belonged there more than anyone. He was not a doctor. He was not a donor. He had no patience for committees, no respect for expensive explanations, and no ability to speak softly when a machine was built badly. He had trained as a biomedical engineer, worked for a hospital equipment company, then left after arguing too many times about why life-saving devices were priced like luxury imports. By the time Julian met him, Caleb was living between rented rooms and clinic storage spaces, building prototypes out of surplus parts, grant scraps, favors, and stubbornness. He could look at a broken pump and tell by the sound whether the valve was sticking. He could talk to elderly patients like they were partners instead of problems. He called Eleanor Miss Ellie from the first day, and somehow she allowed it though she corrected nearly everyone else. Eleanor trusted him because Caleb never promised miracles. He said, "This machine will not save your life forever, ma'am, but it may save you from spending all of what is left in a chair across town." Eleanor had looked at Julian after that and said, "See? That man has manners. He tells the truth without making it ugly." Tasha listened and the image formed so clearly she could almost see it. A younger Julian, proud and hungry, a mother trying to stay alive without becoming a burden, Caleb moving through the room with tools in his pockets and a purpose nobody had paid him enough to carry. It should have been the beginning of something clean. A machine made for people who could not afford to be profitable. A doctor who knew what it meant to be poor. An inventor who refused to let hospitals be the only place survival happened. But clean beginnings did not stay clean when money smelled them. The trial worked better than anyone expected. Not perfectly, not dramatically. Not like a commercial with soft music and white coats smiling. It worked in small human ways. Patients missed fewer appointments because treatment could travel. One grandmother in East New York stopped choosing between dialysis and watching her grandson after school. A retired bus driver in Queens kept enough strength to walk to church on Sundays. Eleanor spent 6 months at home, sitting by her own window instead of under clinic lights, measuring the end of her life in familiar rooms. Caleb documented everything. Every treatment. Every pressure reading. Every adverse event. Every improvement. He did not trust memory because he knew how easily institutions misplace poor people. Names became case numbers. Case numbers became closed files. Closed files became nothing anyone had to answer for. So he wrote, and wrote, and wrote. The first offer came 3 weeks after my mother's second treatment, Julian said. A device company out of New Jersey. They wanted exclusive rights before the trial was complete. Caleb said no. Then another group came. Then a hospital network. Then a licensing broker who smiled through every sentence. Julian looked toward the binder. I told Caleb we should take a meeting. I thought I was being practical. He said practical was the word people used when they wanted poor patients removed from the math. Tasha looked at him. Was he wrong? Julian's answer came after a long silence. No, that single word did more than any apology could have. It did not ask for forgiveness. It did not decorate the truth. It simply stood there. Caleb had wanted the patent structured so community clinics could manufacture or lease the device at cost, with caps written into the licensing agreement. Julian had wanted the same thing at first, or believed he did. But he was also drowning in ambition he had mistaken for responsibility. Eleanor was getting sicker. Medical bills kept arriving in envelopes that looked harmless until opened. Julian's student loans were bigger than any number his family had ever discussed out loud. Investors had begun speaking to him like he was not just a young doctor but a potential founder. They used words like scale, impact, market access, regulatory pathway. Words that sounded noble if no one asked who would be priced out later. Caleb did ask. That was why rooms became uncomfortable when he entered. Then Eleanor died on a Thursday morning in March, with rain tapping against the apartment window and Julian asleep in a chair beside her bed because he had finally learned that some meetings did not matter. She had woken before dawn and asked for water. He gave it to her. She touched his wrist, the way mothers do when they have something serious to say but do not want to frighten their sons. Do not get so big that you stop bending down, she told him. He had said, Mama, rest. She had smiled. I am resting. You listen. Those were not her last words, but they were the last ones that still gave orders. After the funeral, grief did not soften Julian. It organized him. He buried himself in Building Cross Meridian. Caleb called. Julian missed some calls, returned others late, avoided the ones that sounded like arguments. There were filings to prepare, investors to reassure, hospital partners to court. Caleb kept pushing for legal protections Julian's new advisors called commercially unrealistic. Julian told himself there would be time to fix the details after funding. Time to bring Caleb back in. Time to honor the spirit of the promise even if the first documents had to be flexible. That was the lie powerful futures tell ambitious men. Later. Later you will do the right thing. Later you will repair the compromise. Later you will remember who the work was for. 1 year later, Caleb was accused of instability in a filing Julian only skimmed. The language was smooth, careful, devastating. Erratic behavior. Inconsistent communication. Questions regarding capacity. Refusal to engage with standard licensing procedure. Julian had been in San Francisco when Priya's predecessor sent him the summary. He remembered reading it in a hotel suite overlooking the bay, wearing a robe so soft it made him ashamed for reasons he did not examine. He called one lawyer, asked whether the trial data was protected, whether his company was exposed, whether patients would still be served. The lawyer said yes, yes, and yes in the tone of a man paid to make conscience administratively quiet. Julian did not call Caleb. That was the wound. Not that he had forged anything. Not that he had ordered harm. Not that he had set out to erase the man who had helped his mother. It was worse in a quieter way. He had let other people build a wall of reasonable language between himself and the truth, then accepted the silence on the other side because it was convenient. Caleb disappeared after that. At first Julian assumed he was angry, then unreachable, then unstable, then gone. Each new description made the last one easier to live with. Meanwhile, Cross Meridian grew. The company acquired patents, raised capital, won contracts, expanded into hospitals Julian's mother would have been proud to see mentioned beside his name. At galas, people praised him for health equity. At conferences, he spoke about access. In private, he avoided the old trial files because they made him feel the way he had felt as a boy when he walked past restaurants his mother cleaned but could not afford to eat in. Now, in the basement of the clinic where the beginning had been hidden, he understood that Caleb had not vanished into failure. He had been pushed out of credibility, one polished document at a time. Tasha turned the metal case over on an old table while Adrian checked the binder pages. Inside the case was a prototype component wrapped in cloth, a brass pressure regulator with Caleb's initials etched by hand near the base. There was also a flash drive taped inside the lid, and a stack of index cards secured with a rubber band. Tasha picked up the first card. The handwriting matched the note. Patient stories, not just data. Eleanor Cross, like peach tea, blood pressure steadier after third session. Son watches monitors too much. Tell him machines matter but hands matter more. Tasha read it aloud before realizing how private it sounded. Julian closed his eyes. The words entered. Him without defense. Tasha set the card down gently. He remembered her like a person. Yes, Julian said. And I let them turn him into a problem. There it was, said plainly enough that even the basement seemed to hold still. Tasha thought of all the ways people were turned into problems when their needs became inconvenient. A tenant became a balance. A child became a form. A patient became a reimbursement code. A homeless man became unreliable. A poor mother became hard to reach. The language changed first. Then the treatment followed. She looked at Julian, and for the first time she did not see only the distance between them. She saw the danger of becoming so successful at escaping pain that you no longer recognize the people still inside it. My mother used to say something, Tasha said. She said when people stop using your name, watch what they are getting ready to take. Julian looked at her. Tasha continued. Your lawyers called him unavailable. Your files called him unstable. The man at the bus stop called himself Caleb Whitaker like he was trying to pull his whole life back into his own mouth. Julian absorbed that as if she had handed him a sentence he would not be able to put down. Adrian's phone vibrated in his hand, breaking the quiet. He checked the screen and frowned. Priya says Victor has requested confirmation that the closing is still on schedule. He is also asking whether we have contacted any third parties. Julian's expression hardened, but not into anger. Into decision. Do not respond yet. Adrian nodded, then looked toward the stairwell. We should move these materials somewhere secure. Not to your office, Tasha said. Both men looked at her. You said it yourself. Your office leaks. Adrian opened his mouth then closed it. Julian did not argue. Where then? Tasha thought of Mrs. Alvarez's apartment, of Maya's backpack, of the rent notice on her table, of all the places rich people would never look because they confused lack of money with lack of order. But Caleb had trusted a clinic locker, not a penthouse vault. He had trusted the kind of place where forgotten things survived because nobody profitable cared enough to clean them out. First we make copies, she said. Not fancy copies. Regular ones. Somewhere cash only if we have to. Then one set goes to your lawyer, one set goes somewhere Victor does not know, and one set stays with me until Caleb says otherwise. Adrian stared. Ms. Monroe, that may not be advisable. Neither was giving my phone to a stranger with 3% battery, but apparently your whole company is still breathing because I did. Julian almost smiled, not because it was funny but because it was true. She is right. Tasha picked up the binder, surprised by its weight. Paper was heavier when it carried names. Julian gathered the photographs and the metal case. His phone buzzed again. This time the caller identification showed Victor Langley. Julian looked at it then declined the call. A text appeared seconds later. We need to discuss the Whitaker matter before your delay creates liability. Julian showed it to Adrian then to Tasha. She read the sentence and felt the cold return. Not fear exactly. Recognition. The language of men who had already decided the truth was an inconvenience. He knows, she said. Julian looked toward the basement stairs, then back at the open locker. He suspects. Tasha folded Caleb's note and placed it in her coat pocket beside her eviction notice, 2 pieces of paper from 2 different worlds, both threatening to erase someone by 5 o'clock. Then we find Caleb before suspicion becomes paperwork, she said. And as Julian followed her out of the basement, carrying the photograph of his mother alive in a clinic he had tried to forget, he understood that the deepest wound was not what had been stolen from Caleb. It was how many years Julian had needed a poor woman with a cracked phone to make him look for it. They did not go to Julian's office. That was the first decision Tasha made that Julian did not question. Instead, they left the old Queen's Mercy basement through the side door with the binder tucked inside a plain canvas tote the nurse from the alley found beneath a break room sink, the metal case wrapped in Tasha's deli apron, and the photographs divided between 3 envelopes bought with cash from a corner pharmacy 2 blocks away. Adrian wanted a secure courier. Priya wanted encrypted scans. Julian wanted speed. Tasha wanted one thing none of them had said out loud yet: not to make Caleb's proof easier to steal than it had been to hide. So they went to a copy shop on Roosevelt Avenue, the kind with a cracked plastic sign, 2 old printers, passport photos taped to the window, and a man behind the counter who did not care what anyone copied as long as they paid before leaving. Julian stood near the door in his expensive coat, looking more visible than he had in the glass tower. Adrian kept checking the street. Tasha fed pages into the copier with steady hands, 1 sheet at a time, watching names and dates slide under the lid. Eleanor Cross, patient 1, Martha Gaines, patient 2, Luis Ramirez, patient 3, Denise Walker, patient 4. People, not projections. Lives, not assets. The copier light moved back and forth like a slow witness. Every page made 3 copies. 1 for Priya. 1 for Tasha. 1 to hide somewhere even Julian's company could not reach by accident or betrayal. At 4:19 Julian's phone buzzed again. This time it was not Victor. It was Priya Desai. Julian answered on speaker because Tasha lifted one eyebrow at him, and he had begun to understand that trust, with her, was not a feeling but a procedure. Priya's voice came through controlled and tense. "Julian, we have a problem. Victor just filed a notice with the escrow agent claiming attempted interference by an unidentified third party. He is asking them to proceed unless we provide formal contradictory documentation before 5 o'clock. Adrian looked at the clock above the copier. 41 minutes. Julian's jaw set. "We have the documentation." "Then get it to me now. We are scanning. Do not use company systems. Send photographs to my private secure link." And Julian listened carefully. Victor also attached a competency declaration from 2 years ago. It claims Caleb Whitaker is not legally reliable as a witness. Tasha stopped lowering the copier lid. "They are already saying he is confused." Priya heard her. "Is that Ms. Monroe?" "Yes," Julian said. "Good. Ms. Monroe, I need you to preserve the original voicemail and do not forward it to anyone except me. If anyone contacts you, do not answer questions, do not agree to meet, and do not accept anything." Tasha looked at the stack of papers in her hand. "Too late for contact. I think we have been visible since the deli." Adrian moved to the front window. A gray sedan had pulled to the curb across the street. No one got out. It sat there with the engine running, wipers ticking against a windshield that did not need clearing. The copy shop owner looked up from his phone, followed Adrian's gaze, then looked back down with the practiced indifference of a man who had survived New York by not adopting other people's trouble. Julian ended the call and turned to Tasha. "We should get you and Maya somewhere safe until this is over." Tasha put another page on the glass. "Safe where?" "A hotel. A secure apartment. Anywhere you choose. And when I come back, is my landlord going to forget the notice on my door? Is Mr. Feld going to pay me for hours I missed? Is Maya going to think men in black cars are what happens when her mother tells the truth?" Julian did not have an answer. That was the problem with rich solutions. They could move a person out of danger for one night, but they did not always know how to return her to a life that still had the same locks, the same bills, the same neighbors watching from cracked doors. Tasha slid the copy into the tray. "I am not disappearing. Caleb disappeared. And look what they did with the silence." Adrian said quietly, "Ms. Monroe, this could become pressure you do not deserve. Pressure has been here. It just put on a better coat today." At 4:27 they finished the copies. Adrian scanned the most important pages using a private device while Julian photographed each Polaroid with the same care he might have used to handle evidence in an operating room. Tasha kept Caleb's note in her pocket, touching it once to make sure it was still there. Outside, the gray sedan remained. When they stepped onto the sidewalk, its passenger door opened. Victor Langley got out like a man entering a room he believed already belonged to him. He was tall, silver-haired, clean-shaven, wearing a dark overcoat and the kind of calm that came from having frightened people through paperwork for 30 years. He did not look at Tasha first. He looked at Julian, then at the tote bag in Adrian's hand, then finally at Tasha as if she were a line item that had appeared in the wrong budget. "Julian," he said, "this has gone far enough." Julian placed himself half a step forward, but Tasha noticed Victor's eyes follow her pocket, the one holding the folded note. "You followed us," Julian said. Victor gave a small sigh. "I monitored a situation involving proprietary materials and a potentially compromised transaction. That is not the same thing. It is when you are standing outside a copy shop." Victor smiled without warmth. "You always did prefer moral language when legal language became inconvenient." He turned to Tasha. "Ms. Monroe, I believe you have been pulled into a misunderstanding that does not concern you." Tasha looked at him. "Funny. Everybody keeps finding me for something that does not concern me. Because you possess information that may have been given to you by an unreliable man. His name is Caleb." "Yes, Caleb." Victor said it the way a person might say weather damage. "Mr. Whitaker has a long documented history of erratic behavior, delusional claims regarding intellectual property, and refusal to comply with standard legal process. I am sorry you were involved." "You are not sorry." The words came out before Tasha could dress them up. Victor's eyes sharpened, then softened again into performance. "I understand why this may feel personal. You are a working mother. You saw someone distressed. You responded emotionally. That is human. It is also how vulnerable people become instruments in disputes they do not understand." Adrian took one step forward. Julian lifted a hand to stop him. Tasha felt heat rise in her face, but her voice stayed even. "You know a lot about making insults sound educated." Victor's smile thinned. "I know a lot about consequences. For example, if materials from a closed clinical trial are removed without authorization, there may be liability. If recordings are distributed without consent, there may be liability. If false claims delay escrow and damage a lawful transaction, there will certainly be liability." He let the word settle, then reached into his coat and took out a white envelope, not thick enough to be dramatic, not thin enough to be harmless. "However, none of that needs to happen. Sign a simple statement confirming what is obvious. You do not know Mr. Whitaker, you cannot verify his mental state, and you have no independent knowledge of the claims he made. You may keep your life separate from this." He placed the envelope on the newspaper box beside her. "There is $15,000 inside. Not payment for testimony. Assistance. For inconvenience." For 1 second, the city went quiet in the only way cities ever do, not by losing sound, but by pushing one sound to the center of a person's mind.
$15,000.
Tasha did not need to imagine what it could do. Her mind had already started spending it with the speed of hunger. Rent paid. Eviction stopped. Maya's inhaler filled. Clinic form signed. MetroCard loaded for a month. Electric bill cleared. Groceries bought without mental subtraction in the aisle. New winter boots for Maya, the kind with real lining. A charger that did not need a spoon. Maybe one night of sleep without counting backward from disaster. The envelope sat there, plain white, clean, almost modest. That made it worse. If Victor had offered a suitcase, she could have hated it easily. But this looked like an answer. Julian looked at the envelope, and Tasha saw pain cross his face because he understood what Victor had done. He had not offered Tasha luxury. He had offered temporary oxygen to a woman he knew had been breathing through a straw. "Do not," Julian said quietly, but he was not speaking to Victor. He was speaking to himself, to every room where he had once told himself later. Victor's voice remained smooth. "Ms. Monroe, you are not being asked to lie. You are being asked to admit the limits of what you know." Tasha looked at him. I know he sounded sane. Sounding sane is not a legal standard. I know he said the transfer was forged before you knew I existed. You do not know that. I know he knew. Eleanor's name. Victor paused. Very small. But Tasha saw it. Julian saw it too. Adrian's hand tightened around the tote bag. Victor recovered quickly. A name available in old records. Sealed records, Julian said. Victor turned to him. Do not be naive. Nothing is sealed from people determined enough to find it. You would know, Tasha said. Victor's attention returned to her, and the courtesy finally cooled. Be careful. People in your situation often mistake proximity to powerful men for protection. Mr. Cross will go back to his boardroom when this is done. His lawyers will handle the mess. You will go back to your apartment, your job, your landlord, and whatever consequences attach to your choices. There it was. Not a threat shouted in an alley. Nothing so crude. Just a map of her vulnerability, spoken by a man who had never stood in her kitchen counting change. Tasha felt Caleb's note against her coat. She felt the eviction notice folded beside it. 2 papers. 2 erasures. One said a landlord could remove her for not having enough money fast enough. The other said a man's life work could be removed because someone with better shoes had better documents. You checked my situation, she said. Victor did not deny it. Due diligence. You know my rent balance. I know enough to understand $15,000 is not a small inconvenience payment for you. The words burned because they were true. Julian took a step toward Victor, but Tasha raised her hand. Do not speak for me. Julian stopped. That mattered. Tasha picked up the envelope. It was heavier than she expected. Not physically. Morally. She could almost feel Maya's hand in hers at the school gate. Are we moving again? She could hear Mrs. Alvarez saying go careful. She could see the apartment door with the notice taped where neighbors could see. She opened the envelope just enough to see the cashier's check.
$15,000.
Her name was not on it. The payee line was blank. Clean. Flexible. Easy to deny. She slid it back inside. Victor's expression softened again, sensing victory. Take the evening. Think about your daughter. That was his mistake. Not mentioning rent. Not mentioning liability. Her daughter. Tasha looked up slowly. Do not use my child as punctuation. Victor's face went still. I beg your pardon? You heard me. She held the envelope out to him. He did not take it at first. The street watched now. The copy shop owner. A delivery cyclist. A woman waiting for the bus. Adrian. Julian. A gray car idling at the curb. Tasha did not raise her voice because she did not want power borrowed from volume. My daughter needs a home. She needs medicine. She needs a mother who does not come back from school pickup with another story about why grown people in nice coats get to decide what truth costs. But she also needs to know that we do not buy our safety by helping somebody else disappear. Victor's jaw shifted. Very noble. Very impractical. No, Tasha said. Practical is knowing that if you can erase Caleb today, you can erase me tomorrow after I sign. Julian's eyes lowered briefly, and she knew that sentence had struck him too. Victor took the envelope at last. You are making a serious mistake. Tasha touched the pocket with Caleb's note. I have made serious mistakes. This is not one of them. Victor looked at Julian. If these materials are submitted, I will challenge chain of custody, competency, authorization, and every point of contact involving this woman. You will not make 5 o'clock. Julian's voice was calm, but the calm had changed. It was no longer distance. It was decision. Then we stop trying to win your paperwork game. Victor frowned. Meaning? Julian turned to Adrian. Call Priya. Tell her to file for emergency injunctive relief with what we have. Then call the escrow agent directly. I want the release frozen pending fraud review. Adrian was already dialing. Victor gave a short laugh. On what basis? Julian looked at Tasha, then at the tote bag, then at the city around them. On the basis that a man you declared unreliable left better records in a basement locker than your clients left in a transfer file. Victor stepped closer, voice lower now. You are exposing yourself. No, Julian said. I am exposing what I should have questioned years ago. Tasha's phone buzzed in her hand. She looked down. Unknown number again. For a moment she thought it was Caleb. But when she answered, no one spoke. In the background she heard a sound she recognized immediately. The recorded announcement from a city bus pulling up to a stop. Then Caleb's voice, faint, rushed, almost swallowed by street noise. Tasha, do not bring Cross to the front entrance. They watch the front. If you found the names, you know why they want the machine. I am at the old chapel shelter near Queensboro. Ask for Sister Ruth. And Tasha. The line crackled. I am sorry about the money. They always find the place where people hurt. The call ended. Tasha looked at Julian. He is alive. Victor's expression changed before he could stop it. Not surprise. Confirmation. He had not known where Caleb was until that second. Tasha saw it and understood too late that answering the phone in front of him had given away more than she meant to. Julian saw it as well. Adrian, he said sharply, we move now. Tasha stepped off the curb toward the car, the copies under one arm, Caleb's note and her eviction notice pressed together in her pocket. Behind her, Victor Langley stood beside the gray sedan, no longer smiling. And for the first time all day, Tasha understood that the fight was no longer about whether Caleb was telling the truth. It was about whether they could reach him before the truth was buried again, this time with everyone watching. The car moved toward Queensboro through late afternoon traffic, but inside it, time felt tighter than the seatbelt across Tasha's chest. 4:32. 28 minutes until 5 o'clock. Caleb was alive. Victor had heard enough to know where to look. Julian's lawyers were trying to freeze an escrow release with documents pulled from a basement locker and photographs copied in a shop that smelled like toner and old receipts. Adrian was speaking into his phone in a low voice from the front seat, feeding Priya names, dates, patient numbers, every piece of proof that might slow a machine built to move without conscience. Julian sat beside Tasha with the metal case on his lap and the Polaroids tucked inside his coat, his eyes fixed ahead, but Tasha could tell. He was not looking at traffic. He was looking at years. At all the moments when he had believed silence was neutral. Tasha looked down at her own hands. There was gray copy dust on her fingertips and a thin paper cut across her thumb from the patient logs. She rubbed it against her palm and thought about the envelope Victor had offered.
15 dollars.
She had given it back. On the sidewalk, with Julian watching and Victor smiling like a man who knew hunger had legal uses, giving it back had felt clean. Now, in the back seat of a car that did not belong to her, moving toward a shelter where a missing inventor was hiding, the cleanness had begun to hurt. $15,000 could have changed the shape of tomorrow. Not forever. Tasha was too practical to believe in forever money. But tomorrow, yes. It could have kept the apartment. It could have put Maya's medicine in the cabinet before the next wheeze became a phone call from school. It could have filled the refrigerator without Tasha standing in the aisle calculating protein by ounce. It could have bought time. And time was the one thing poor mothers were always accused of mismanaging by people who had never had to purchase it in pieces. Her phone buzzed. Mrs. Alvarez. Tasha answered immediately. Is Maya okay? She is fine, Mija, Mrs. Alvarez said, though her voice had that careful softness adults use when a child is nearby. She is doing homework. She ate soup. But somebody knocked on your door. Tasha sat up. Who? Julian turned his head. Adrian stopped speaking mid-sentence. A man in a suit. Not the landlord. He said he had documents for you, but I did not open my door all the way. I told him you were not home. Tasha's throat tightened. What did he leave? An envelope. Under your door. For a moment the city outside the window blurred. Tasha knew before Mrs. Alvarez said it. She knew because Victor was the kind of man who did not make one offer when two would hurt more. What color? She asked. White. Tasha closed her eyes. Do not let Maya touch it. I already picked it up with a dish towel and put it on top of your refrigerator. I watch television, Tasha. I know things. On any other day, Tasha might have laughed. Not now. Thank you. Lock your door. Always. Tasha ended the call and held the phone in her lap. Julian's face had gone hard. He sent another payment. He sent the choice home, Tasha said. Her voice sounded strange to her, calm but far away. He put it where my daughter eats cereal. Adrian looked back from the front. We can have someone retrieve it as evidence. No, Tasha said too quickly. Then quieter. No, not yet. Julian understood faster than Adrian did. You want to decide what to do with it yourself. Tasha looked out the window at a row of storefronts sliding past. Discount furniture, tax help, a nail salon, a church with a banner that read Free Dinner Wednesday. I already decided. Then why does it sound like you are still carrying it? She turned on him. Because I am. Because I can do the right thing and still know exactly what it costs. That is the part people like Victor count on, but it is also the part people like you forget when you call something courage. Julian took that without defense. You are right. Tasha hated how often he was starting to say that. Agreement did not pay rent either. The car slowed near a red light. On the corner, a mother lifted a stroller over a ridge of dirty snow while holding a grocery bag in her teeth for balance. No one helped. Not because people were cruel necessarily, but because everyone was busy surviving their own weather. Tasha watched until the woman made it onto the curb. When Maya was 4, she said, surprising herself, I got offered $200 cash to say I had worked a cleaning shift I had not worked. The woman who owned the company needed fake hours for a city contract. $200. Back then I had $7 until payday and Maya needed winter shoes. I said no. Then I went home and cried into a towel so she would not hear me. That is what doing right looked like. Not glowing. Not proud. Just tired and still broke. Julian listened. Adrian did too. My mother used to clean office buildings, Julian said softly. She used to say honesty did not always protect you from hunger, but dishonesty made hunger the boss. Tasha looked at him then. Not because the sentence fixed anything, but because it sounded like something a woman who had ironed a white coat like church linen might have said. The car turned onto a narrower street near the old chapel shelter. The building appeared between a laundromat and a closed community center. Red brick, arched windows, a small stone cross worn smooth by weather, and a blue awning that said St. Bridget Outreach in peeling white letters. A line of people waited near the side entrance for the evening meal, bundled in coats, hoodies, blankets, uniforms, whatever kept the wind out. Tasha saw Julian's eyes move over them, not with pity, but with the uncomfortable recognition of a man trying to separate human beings from statistics in real time. Do not walk in like you own the rescue, she said. I do not. Then let your body know that. He nodded. Adrian reached for the door. Tasha stopped him. No security posture. No rusing. No surrounding people. We ask for Sister Ruth like Caleb said. They stepped out. Cold air moved between the buildings. The gray sedan was nowhere in sight, but Tasha did not trust absence anymore. She tucked the copies under her arm and kept her phone in her hand. Julian carried the metal case in a reusable grocery bag they had bought at the pharmacy so it looked less like evidence and more like ordinary life. Inside the shelter, the air was warm with soup, floor cleaner, damp wool, and too many bodies trying not to take up too much space. Folding tables lined the old chapel hall. Volunteers moved quietly, filling bowls and passing bread. On the far wall, where an altar must have been years ago, a bulletin board held bus schedules, clinic hours, job postings, and handwritten notes from people looking for relatives who might not want to be found. Tasha understood immediately why Caleb had come here. It was the kind of place where a person could be visible enough to eat and invisible enough to survive. A woman in her 60s stood near the kitchen doorway wearing jeans, a gray sweatshirt, and a wooden cross on a cord around her neck. Her hair was silver and cut close. Her eyes took in Julian's coat, Adrian's nervous watchfulness, Tasha's work shoes, and the pharmacy bag in Julian's hand before anyone spoke. You must be looking for trouble, she said. Tasha stepped forward. We are looking for Sister Ruth. Then you found both. Caleb sent us. Sister Ruth's expression changed, not much but enough. She looked at Tasha more carefully. Name. Tasha Monroe. He said a mother with a cracked phone might come. Said if she came with a rich man, make the rich man wait until she speaks first. Julian lowered his eyes almost to bow. That sounds like Caleb. Sister Ruth looked at him. And you are? Julian Cross. Something old and unimpressed crossed her face. I know who you are. Your name has been on enough pamphlets. It was not praise. Julian accepted that too. Is Caleb here? Tasha asked. Sister Ruth looked toward the kitchen, then at the front entrance, then at the side door. He was. 10 minutes ago. Tasha felt the floor drop beneath the sentence. Was. He saw a man outside in a gray sedan and asked for the back room. Then he changed his mind. Said he would not put the shelter at risk. He left through the pantry door. Adrian cursed under his breath, then apologized. Sister Ruth ignored him. Julian stepped forward. Which way? Toward the old parish house. But he was moving slow. Tasha looked at the clock above the hall. 4:46. 14 minutes. Her phone buzzed again. Unknown number. Everyone saw it. Tasha answered and put it on speaker before Julian could ask. This time the voice was not Caleb's. It was Victor Langley's, calm as a signed letter. Ms. Monroe, I trust you received the envelope at your apartment. Tasha did not speak. Victor continued. I am giving you one final opportunity to step away. You are not protecting Mr. Whitaker. You are delaying a process that will conclude with or without your feelings. Walk out of that shelter, tell Mr. Cross you misunderstood, and take care of your daughter. Sister Ruth's eyes sharpened. Julian's face went still. Tasha looked across the hall at a little boy eating soup beside his mother, his feet swinging above the floor, his plastic spoon too big for his hand. She thought of Maya at Mrs. Alvarez's table. She thought of the envelope on top of the refrigerator. She thought of Caleb hiding his proof in a locker because he knew the world needed paper before it believed the poor and forgotten were people. You left money in my home, Tasha said. That was generous assistance. No. It was bait. It was mercy, Ms. Monroe. You should learn to recognize it. Tasha's hand tightened around the phone. Mercy does not come with a blank pay line. Silence. Then Victor's voice lost one thin layer of polish. You have no idea what you are standing in. Yes, I do, Tasha said. I am standing in a room full of people your kind of paperwork usually talks over. Julian looked at her then, and in his eyes she saw the exact moment he understood that this was no longer only Caleb's test. It was hers and his and maybe everyone's who had ever claimed to care about people after the numbers were settled. Victor said, think very carefully. Tasha looked at Sister Ruth. I am. Then she ended the call. Nobody moved for 1 second. Then Tasha turned to Julian. I am going to say this once. If helping Caleb means my daughter and I lose our apartment, I will still help him. But I will not let you turn my sacrifice into a nice story, while you go home to a building with a doorman. If you want to fix something, fix the thing that lets men like Victor use rent and medicine as leverage. Julian absorbed the words like a sentence passed in court. I will. Do not promise. Prove. He nodded. Then help me prove it by finding him. Sister Ruth grabbed a ring of keys from her belt. Pantry door is this way. They moved through the kitchen past steaming pots and shelves of donated cans. Tasha led, not because she knew the building, but because Caleb had chosen her kind of courage over Julian's kind of power. At the back door, Sister Ruth stopped and pointed across a small courtyard toward a narrow brick walkway. Old parish house. Basement entrance on the left. If he is anywhere, he is there. The clock on Tasha's phone read 4:49. 11 minutes. She stepped into the cold with Julian behind her, Adrian calling Priya, Sister Ruth holding the door, and Victor's money sitting miles away on top of a refrigerator in the apartment Tasha might still lose. For one sharp second she wanted to be the kind of person who could choose easily. Then she thought of Maya asking whether they were moving again, and she understood the answer that would matter most one day was not yes or no. It was why. She crossed the courtyard toward the parish house, carrying Caleb's copied proof under her arm, and chose the truth again with every step. The old parish house looked abandoned from the outside, but Tasha had learned a long time ago that abandoned did not always mean empty. Sometimes it meant unpaid. Sometimes it meant forgotten by the people who owned paper and remembered by the people who needed shelter. The brick walkway behind St. Bridget Outreach was narrow and uneven, with weeds pushing through cracks and a broken gutter tapping water into an old paint bucket near the wall. The winter light had begun to thin, turning everything gray at the edges. 4:49. 11 minutes until 5 o'clock. Tasha moved first, copies pressed under her arm, her phone in her hand, the cold cutting through the damp cuffs of her pants. Julian followed with the grocery bag holding the metal case, and Adrian came behind them, one ear on the phone with Priya, his voice low and fast as he repeated phrases that sounded too polished for the urgency of the moment. Emergency injunction. Fraud review. Material defect in transfer. Competency challenge. Chain of custody. Tasha heard the words but did not let them become the center of the world. Caleb was the center. A man the law had already started calling unreliable before anyone in power had bothered to find him. The basement entrance was half hidden behind a rusted railing and a stack of empty bread crates. Sister Ruth unlocked the outer gate, then paused with her hand on the basement door. "If he is in there," she said, looking at Julian, "you let him decide who comes close." Julian nodded. "I understand." Sister Ruth's eyes did not soften. Understanding after the damage is easy. Obeying it is harder. She opened the door. The smell came out first. Old stone, dust, cardboard, and the faint warm scent of soup drifting from the shelter. Kitchen behind them. A narrow stairwell led down into a low room lit by one bare bulb. Tasha stepped carefully, one hand brushing the wall. At the bottom, the space opened into what had once been a church storage room. Folding chairs leaned in stacks against one wall. Boxes of donated coats sat beneath a plastic tarp. A cracked statue of St. Joseph stood in the corner, one hand missing, still holding the child with the other. And there, sitting on an overturned milk crate beside a small space heater, was Caleb Whitaker. He looked smaller than he had at the bus stop, as if every hour of being hunted by documents had folded him inward. His brown coat hung open. The blue hospital bracelet circled his wrist. A paper cup of water sat near his foot, untouched. In his lap was a second binder, thinner than the one from the clinic locker, tied shut with a shoelace. When he saw Tasha, his shoulders lowered with relief so deep it seemed almost painful. When he saw Julian, his whole body went still. "Caleb," Julian said, and the name came out like a debt. Caleb looked at him for a long moment. "Dr. Cross." Julian flinched slightly. Not because the title was insulting. Because it remembered who he had been before the boardrooms, before the polished speeches, before the file that called a man unstable and made silence convenient. "I have not earned that in a long time," Julian said. Caleb's eyes moved to the grocery bag in Julian's hand. "You found locker 12. Tasha found it." Caleb looked at her. "I am sorry." "You keep saying that," Tasha said. "I am starting to think you do it when other people should." A tired smile touched Caleb's face for half a second and disappeared. "Maybe." Adrian came down the last step, phone still pressed to his ear. "Priya needs a live statement if we can get one." The escrow agent is hesitating, but Victor is pushing hard. "We have 8 minutes." Caleb closed his eyes. 8 minutes after 14 years. That sounds about right. Julian stepped forward, then stopped himself. "Caleb, I need to know what happened." Caleb gave a dry laugh. "No. You need what can be proven before 5 o'clock. What happened is longer." Tasha crouched a few feet away, not too close, because she remembered how carefully he had stood at the bus stop, how the world had taught him distance. "Then tell the part that saves what they are trying to take." Caleb looked at her, and the basement seemed to rearrange around that sentence. Not Julian's power. Not Adrian's urgency. Tasha's plain instruction. Caleb untied the shoelace around the binder with slow fingers. His hands were shaking again, but not from confusion. From exhaustion, cold, and the knowledge that a person could carry truth for years and still have to prove he was sane enough to own it. He opened the binder. Inside were not just technical drawings. There were letters, dated memos, photocopies of checks, printed emails, trial consent forms, and one sealed envelope with Eleanor Cross's name written across it in blue ink. Julian saw his mother's name and stopped breathing for a second. Caleb did not hand it to him yet. The device was never supposed to become a luxury unit, Caleb said. That was the whole point. Portable filtration for clinics, shelters, rural hospitals, disaster sites, homes where people could not get to treatment 3 times a week without losing work, losing childcare, losing dignity. The patent structure was written for capped licensing. Community clinics would pay costs plus 10%. Hospitals could pay more to subsidize the lower rate. Your mother understood that better than anyone. Julian whispered. She would have. She did, Caleb said. She made me write it down in plain language because she said lawyers hide cruelty in long sentences. Tasha glanced at Julian. He looked as if the sentence had reached into his chest. Caleb pulled out a document covered in annotations. This is the original licensing memo. Signed by me. Witnessed by Eleanor Cross and Dr. Miriam Vale, the clinic director. It states that no full transfer of ownership could occur without a live inventor confirmation and patient trust review. Adrian moved closer. That clause is not in the current transfer file. Because Victor removed it. Julian's eyes hardened. How? Caleb turned a page. Not all at once. That is not how men like him steal. They translate first. They take a promise written in human language and turn it into procedural language. Then they call the old promise informal. Then they call the person who remembers it difficult. Then unstable. Then unavailable. By the time they take the thing, nobody remembers what it was for. Tasha felt the word settle beside her own life. How many times had a person's need been renamed until it no longer required mercy? Late rent became non-compliance. A sick child became missing paperwork. A man protecting a device became obstruction. Caleb took a flash drive from a pocket inside the binder. This holds the video statement Dr. Vale recorded before she died. She knew they were rewriting the file. She knew I was being boxed out. She sent a copy to me and one to Julian's old resident address, but by then he was gone. Julian looked stricken. I never received it. I know, Caleb said. It was returned. He slid a photocopy across the floor. Return to sender. Forwarding expired. Julian picked it up as if it weighed more than the metal case. Adrian was still on the phone. Priya says a video from Dr. Vale would help, but we need immediate authentication. Caleb lifted his wrist, showing the faded blue bracelet. That is why I kept this. Patient trial bracelet, not hospital admission. The number on it matches the first trial ledger and the device serial log.
Eleanor's bracelet matked mine.
We use paired bands for home treatment sessions so community volunteers could document chain of care. Victor's false transfer claims the prototype was never active in community trial. Only lab development. If that were true, these bracelet numbers would not exist. Julian opened the metal case and removed the brass pressure regulator with Caleb's initials. Caleb pointed. Turn it over. Julian did. On the underside, scratched into the metal, were 3 letters and a number. EC1. Eleanor Cross, patient 1. Julian's hand trembled. Caleb watched him with no triumph. Only grief that had become tired of waiting. Your mother asked me to mark it, Caleb said. She said if people ever forgot who the machine was built for, make the machine remember. Tasha covered her mouth not to hide tears. Exactly, but to hold herself steady. Around them the basement bulb hummed. Above them, the shelter floor creaked with the movement of people eating dinner. People whose names would never appear in acquisition models unless somebody made room for them. Adrian's voice sharpened. Priya says the escrow agent is requesting direct inventor confirmation now. They are on a recorded line. Caleb, can you state your name, capacity, and objection to the transfer? Caleb nodded, but before Adrian could switch calls, footsteps sounded above the stairwell. Sister Ruth's voice came from the top, firm and unimpressed. This is a private storage area. Victor Langley answered with a politeness that made Tasha's skin go cold. I am aware. I am here to prevent the mishandling of legally disputed materials. Julian stood. Caleb's face closed. Tasha rose with him. Victor appeared at the bottom of the stairs with one assistant behind him, holding a slim folder. He looked around the basement, taking in the space heater, the donated coats, the old statue, the binders, the phone in Adrian's hand. His expression was not angry. It was worse. It was satisfied, as if the scene confirmed every argument he wanted to make about disorder, unreliability, and poor people touching things rich people preferred sterile. Mr. Whitaker, Victor said, I am glad you are safe. There has been concern regarding your condition. Caleb laughed once. You mean concern that I was not gone enough? Victor ignored that and looked at Julian. If you submit anything obtained here, I will challenge it immediately. This environment is uncontrolled. The documents are unauthenticated. And this witness has a standing competency declaration. Tasha stepped forward before Julian could answer. You mean the declaration you helped create? Victor's gaze moved to her. Miss Monroe, you have already placed yourself in a difficult position. No. You placed everybody here in one. I just answered a phone. Victor opened his folder. Since you insist on participating, perhaps you should understand what you are risking. I have prepared an affidavit. Sign it, and you confirm only what is true. You cannot personally verify Mr. Whitaker's claims. You were approached by him while he appeared distressed, and you later came into possession of materials you did not understand. Sign that, and you are removed from further legal exposure. He removed a second paper from the folder. Refuse, and you may be named in filings by morning. Tasha looked at the paper, then at Caleb, then at Julian. It was the same offer again, wearing a different suit. Not money this time. Fear. Her rent, her job, her daughter, her apartment, her lack of legal vocabulary, all gathered into one clean document with a signature line waiting to turn her honesty into ambiguity. Julian said, "She is not signing anything." Victor did not look at him. "She can speak for herself." That was the one true thing he said. Tasha took the paper. Adrian made a small sound of warning, but she held up one hand. She read slowly. The words were exactly what Caleb had described. Translate first. Soften the theft. Make the truth uncertain. I observed an unidentified male in a distressed state. I cannot confirm the accuracy of any statements made. I do not possess independent knowledge. I may have misunderstood references to legal or medical matters. Each sentence was a small eraser. Nothing openly false. Nothing fully true. A document built to make her voice technically present and morally useless. Victor held out a pen. Tasha looked at it. Then she looked at Julian. "This is how it starts, right?" Julian's face was pale. "Yes. Not with somebody saying erase him. Just with somebody saying be reasonable." Caleb closed his eyes. Tasha folded the affidavit once, then twice, not neatly this time but sharply. She placed it on the floor beside Victor's polished shoes. "I know what I heard. I know what I saw. I know a man does not become confused just because his truth makes money uncomfortable. And I know that if I sign something small and slippery today, tomorrow you will call it proof that he was never worth hearing." Victor's mask thinned. "You are making yourself useful to people who will forget you." Tasha looked at Julian. "Will you?" The question struck harder than accusation. Julian looked at Tasha, then at Caleb, then at the photograph of Eleanor in his hand. "No," he said. "But if I do, may God make someone like you stand in my way again." For a second, even Victor had no sentence ready. Adrian seized the silence. "Priya has the escrow agent on the line. Caleb now." He placed the phone on speaker and held it toward Caleb. A woman's voice came through, formal and tense. "This call is being recorded. Please state your full legal name." Caleb straightened on the milk crate. The shaking in his hands did not leave, but his voice did. "My name is Caleb Nathaniel Whitaker. I am the sole inventor of the Whitaker portable hemofiltration system and original holder of the patent rights disputed today. Do you consent to the transfer currently scheduled for escrow release at 5 o'clock Eastern Time?" Victor stepped forward. Julian blocked him, not touching, just standing there, a wall made of decision instead of force. Caleb looked at Tasha. She nodded once. "No," Caleb said. "I do not consent. I never signed the transfer. The document bearing my signature is false. The device was developed under a community trial trust with patient 1, Eleanor Cross, and others listed in the original ledger. I am submitting objection and requesting immediate freeze pending fraud review." The line went silent. Everyone looked at the phone. 4:57. 3 minutes. The woman said, "Mr. Whitaker, can you provide confirming identifiers connected to the original trial?" Caleb lifted the bracelet and read the faded number slowly. Then Julian, voice breaking, read the engraving beneath the regulator. EC1. Adrian sent the photographs as he spoke. Priya's voice joined the line, sharp and clear. "Supporting documents have been transmitted. We are filing emergency papers now. Any release after this recorded objection creates notice of fraud." Victor's face changed. Not much, but enough for Tasha to know the door had moved. Not open fully, but moved. At 4:59, the escrow agent said, "Release is suspended pending review." The words were plain, almost boring, but in the basement they landed like a bell. Caleb lowered his head into his hands. Julian turned away, covering his mouth, the photograph of his mother pressed to his chest. Adrian exhaled for what sounded like the first time in 10 minutes. Tasha stood perfectly still, waiting for joy, but what came first was exhaustion. The truth had not won everything. It had only survived the hour. Victor closed his folder. This is temporary. Tasha looked at him. So was your silence. Caleb lifted his head. Victor. The lawyer paused at the stairs. Caleb reached into the binder and removed the sealed envelope with Eleanor's name. You wanted the original signed transfer. You should know why you never found it. He opened the envelope and pulled out a single handwritten page, yellowed at the edges, signed by Eleanor Cross, Caleb Whitaker, and Dr. Miriam Vale. Julian stepped closer. Caleb read aloud. No sale, transfer, or exclusive license shall be valid if it removes affordable access from the patient communities named in this trial. Any future commercial partner must preserve the community price cap in perpetuity. He looked up. Eleanor made us add that sentence. Not me. Your mother, Julian. Julian's eyes filled, but he did not look away. Caleb handed him the page. She said a machine that saves only people who can afford it is not a miracle. It is inventory. The basement went silent again. But this silence was different. It did not erase. It revealed. The great secret was not only that Victor had forged a signature. It was that the device had never been Caleb's alone to sell, never Julian's company's to acquire cleanly, never a product meant to be priced into prestige. It had been built around a promise made to the first patients, a promise witnessed by a dying mother who understood exactly what rich rooms would one day try to forget. Julian held the paper with both hands. Tasha saw the moment it entered him fully. Caleb had not called to become rich. He had not hidden proof to claim a fortune. The $3.8 million was not the prize. It was the price someone was willing to pay to bury the promise. Julian looked at Victor, and when he spoke, his voice had no performance left. You did not just try to steal a patent. You tried to sell my mother's name against the people she made us protect. Victor said nothing. For once, silence belonged to him, and it did not help. Outside, somewhere above the basement, the shelter bell rang for second servings. People moved across the floorboards carrying bowls, asking for bread, laughing softly at ordinary things. The world had not stopped. That was what made the moment sacred. While men in legal offices fought over ownership, people still needed dinner. People still needed medicine. People still needed devices built for them not to disappear into prices they could never pay. Tasha looked at Caleb, then Julian, then the old sign page. She thought of the envelope on her refrigerator, the rent notice in her pocket, Maya's inhaler, the cracked phone that had carried a voice across the line just long enough. She had entered the day with 3% battery. Somehow, that had been enough to keep a promise alive. By 6:15 that evening, the story had moved from a basement beneath a shelter to conference calls, emergency filings, frozen accounts, and people in offices suddenly using careful voices. The escrow release stayed suspended. Priya filed the fraud review before the courts closed, attaching Caleb's live recorded objection, the original community trust language, the bracelet identifiers, the trial ledger, the photographs, and Eleanor Cross's signed condition that affordable access could never be removed. Victor Langley did not leave in handcuffs, because real consequences rarely arrive as neatly as stories want them to. He left with his folder closed, his face pale beneath the calm, and 3 lawyers calling him before he reached the sidewalk. By morning, the seller group had withdrawn the transfer request. By the end of the week, Victor's firm announced an internal investigation. By the end of the month, the forged signature, the altered licensing language, and the competency filing that had been used to bury Caleb's credibility were under review by state authorities and a federal civil fraud unit. But none of that happened fast enough to matter to Tasha when she walked back into her apartment that night and saw the white envelope still sitting on top of the refrigerator. Maya was asleep on Mrs. Alvarez's couch under a crocheted blanket. The television was low. Mrs. Alvarez stood in the doorway with tired eyes and did not ask for the whole story. She simply handed Tasha a bowl of soup and said, "Eat before you explain anything." Tasha took the bowl, but her eyes stayed on the envelope. Julian, standing in the hallway behind her, saw it too. "That is evidence," Adrian said quietly. Tasha nodded. Then she climbed onto a kitchen chair, took the envelope down with 2 fingers, and placed it on the folding table beside the eviction notice. There they were again, 2 pieces of paper, one offering rescue with a hook in it, the other threatening removal because the numbers did not care how hard she worked. Julian looked at both and said nothing for a long time. Then he took out his phone, not to make a donation, not to send a wire, not to solve her life with the kind of gesture that would make him feel generous and leave the system untouched. He called Priya first. Add witness intimidation and improper inducement to the file, he said. The money was sent to Ms. Monroe's home after she refused to sign. Then he called his housing counsel. Tasha turned sharply. What are you doing? Julian lowered the phone. Not buying your silence. Not buying your gratitude. I am making sure the pressure Victor used does not become the reason you suffer for telling the truth. That sounds expensive. It is overdue. The next morning, Julian's attorneys contacted Tasha's landlord. Not with threats but with facts. The notice had procedural defects. The building had unresolved heat complaints. The rent balance was real, but so were the repairs Tasha had requested and never received. A legal aid attorney, paid through an emergency witness protection fund Julian created that same day and placed outside his company's control, took Tasha's case. Her eviction filing was halted. Her rent was brought current through a documented witness support grant, not a blank envelope, not hush money, not pity slipped under a door. Her name stayed on the lease. Her dignity stayed with it. Mr. Feld called her the next afternoon, suddenly polite, saying her shifts were available if she wanted them. Tasha thanked him and said she would think about it. That was the first luxury she received. Not money, but the ability to think before saying yes. Caleb was moved into a small recovery apartment connected to St. Bridget Outreach, where Sister Ruth checked on him twice a day and pretended not to worry. Doctors examined him. Lawyers listened to him. Reporters requested interviews, but Caleb refused most of them. I did not survive all this to become a headline, he told Julian. Build the clinic access model. Then I will talk. Julian did more than talk. He resigned from the acquisition committee that had nearly approved the stolen transfer, opened an independent investigation into every legacy patent file connected to his company, and placed the Whitaker device into a non-profit manufacturing trust with Caleb as inventor, Priya as legal overseer, Sister Ruth on the community board, and Tasha Monroe listed not as a charity recipient, but as founding director of patient access. When Julian offered her the role, Tasha laughed once because it sounded impossible. Then she read the job description. Salary, health insurance, flexible school pickup hours, transit allowance, decision-making authority, not a title made for photographs. Work that mattered. Why me? She asked. Julian looked at her across the same folding table where the envelope and eviction notice had Saturday. Because you knew where to look when all my people knew where to search. Because you understood Caleb before we verified him. Because the communities this device was built for do not need another executive speaking beautifully about them from a room they cannot enter. Tasha did not answer right away. Maya sat beside her doing homework, pretending not to listen and listening to every word. Finally, Tasha said, "If I take it, I am not going to be your inspirational story." Julian nodded. Good. I need you to be inconvenient. 3 months later, the first Cross Whitaker Community Treatment Room opened inside St. Bridget Outreach. Not in a tower, not behind marble, not where people needed 3 forms of insurance and a day off work to be seen. The walls were painted warm yellow. The chairs were sturdy. Bus schedules were posted by the door. The device sat in the corner, redesigned, certified, and priced under the trust cap Eleanor had insisted on years before. Caleb arrived with a cane and a new coat Sister Ruth claimed was donated, though everyone knew she had bought it. Julian stood near the back, not at the podium, because Tasha had told him the room did not need saving twice. And when the first patient signed in, Tasha handed her a clipboard, looked her in the eyes, and said the sentence she wished someone had said to Caleb long ago. "We believe you. Let us start there." 1 year later, the cracked phone sat inside a small glass case near the front desk of the Cross Whitaker Community Care Center. It was not polished. It was not repaired. The screen still carried the thin white fractures that crossed Maya's old yellow sun sticker on the back, and the charging port still had to be held at an angle if anyone wanted to make it work. Tasha had argued against displaying it at first. She said it was just a phone, and Caleb had shaken his head with the stubbornness of a man who had once hidden a revolution in a basement locker. "No," he told her. "That phone is the reason the right people were finally forced to listen to the wrong person." So there it stayed, not as a monument to technology, but as proof that a broken thing in the hands of a decent person could carry more truth than a perfect document in the hands of someone dishonest. Patients saw it when they checked in. Mothers with tired eyes. Grandfathers with careful steps. Home health aides still wearing uniforms from overnight shifts. Men who had waited too long to ask for help, because every office they entered had made them feel like a problem before they finished explaining the pain. Beside the phone was a small card, written by Maya in her neat fourth-grade handwriting. "My mom had only 3% battery, but she still shared it." Julian read that card every time he visited, and every time it did what board reports could not. It reminded him that access was not a slogan. Access was a bus route that lined up with treatment hours. It was paperwork written in language people could understand. It was a clinic worker looking up when someone walked in. It was making sure no patient had to be rich enough to be believed. Julian did not become perfect. Men do not become good forever because one hard day embarrasses them into honesty. He had to keep choosing. He had to sit in meetings where profit argued smoothly against mercy. He had to hear Tasha say no in front of donors who were not used to being corrected by a woman who still carried coupons in her purse. He had to watch Caleb cross out entire paragraphs of legal language and write in the margin, "Say what you mean." But he stayed. More importantly, he changed what stayed after him. The Whitaker device went into 12 clinics across New York, New Jersey, and Maryland in its first year under the trust. Every contract carried Eleanor Cross's sentence in plain print. "A machine that saves only people who can afford it is not a miracle. It is inventory." Caleb never got back all the years that had been taken from him. No court filing could return cold nights, lost rooms, or the humiliation of being called unstable by people who had profited from not hearing him. But he got his name back. He got his work back. He got to stand in a treatment room and watch the device he built serve the people it had been built for. Sometimes, when the clinic was quiet, he sat beside the glass case and spoke with Maya while she did homework after school. She asked him once if the phone was really worth $3.8 million. Caleb smiled and said, "No, child. The phone was worth about $40 on a good day." Maya frowned. "Then why does everybody say it mattered so much?" Caleb looked toward Tasha, who was helping an older woman fill out a form at the front desk. "Because value is not always the same as price." Maya thought about that, then wrote it down in the corner of her notebook like it might be on a test someday. Tasha kept the apartment for a while, not because she had to, but because leaving immediately would have made the old fear feel like it had one. Later, when she and Maya moved into a better place with working heat, a real bedroom door and a kitchen window that opened without a screwdriver, Tasha took the eviction notice with her. She kept it folded in a drawer, not as shame but as evidence. Whenever people praised her courage as if it had been beautiful, she remembered what it had actually felt like. Standing between a blank check and a hungry future, knowing the truth would not pay the rent by itself, choosing it anyway because her daughter was watching even when she was not in the room. That was the part Tasha wanted people to understand. Kindness was not soft. Kindness was not weakness. Sometimes kindness was expensive. Sometimes it made you late to work, drained your battery, put your name in rooms where powerful people tried to use it, and asked you to stand firm before anyone had promised you protection. But the opposite cost more. The opposite was a world where people like Caleb disappeared into polite paperwork, where mothers like Tasha learned never to help because help might punish them, where men like Julian could build towers in the name of healing and forget to bend down. The world did not change because a billionaire felt guilty. It changed because a tired black mother at a Brooklyn bus stop still recognized a human voice under a torn coat. It changed because a forgotten inventor refused to let his work become a luxury. It changed because a son finally listened to the promise his mother left behind. And maybe that is what the cracked phone was really there to say. You do not need a full battery to do the right thing. You do not need a perfect life to protect someone else's dignity. You only need one moment, one choice, one small mercy offered before the world explains why it is inconvenient. Tasha Monroe had almost nothing that morning, but she had enough kindness left to hand a stranger her phone. And because she did, a man got his name back, a promise survived, a clinic opened its doors, And thousands of people who had been priced out of hope finally heard the words Caleb had waited years to hear himself. We believe you, let us start there.